We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson, fixing 8 more teams, Sam. We've already done it for the first 24 teams around the NFL. Go check it out wherever you're listening to this podcast. We've fixed every team in the AFC and then the NFC East and North, although some new things have happened since we fixed the Cowboys in the NFC East.
Yeah, pretty significant ones, in fact, like, Dak Prescott getting locked up long term.
Yeah, glad you spent 10 minutes telling us he was going to get franchise tagged.
Well, I said I would franchise tag him, and they should.
It's what we're doing, right? It's what we're doing.
The point was they were going to keep him in the building. They weren't going to let him walk.
Correct.
So that part, at least, was right. They just happened to save. They paid more overall, but saved short term.
At least you weren't as wrong as Orlovsky.
Yeah, he was real.
Poor Dan.
Wrong.
We keep picking on him every show. We're going to have him on.
I don't. You keep hammering away at poor Dan.
Dan gives refreshingly bad takes that you can discuss. Different takes. I'm sorry.
That should be your leadoff question when we do get him on the pod.
It's gonna be, Dan, you give refreshingly bad takes.
And somewhere in the NFL, somebody agrees with
you somewhere, which is great. Like, somebody needs that insight to what the other 5 people agree with. Anyway, let's get into it. NFC South. Let's do it right away. As a whole, this division, really interesting as you see the Falcons are in rebuilding mode.
Wait, hang on. You're just going to roll into this without referencing the fact that we've moved the studio to an undisclosed location on top of a mountain?
Yeah, the studio's having some issues with the windows that usually house our faces.
Yeah. If you're listening on, the audio format, this next 30 seconds is going to be meaningless to you. But for anybody watching on YouTube,
but go click on YouTube.
The studio is now positioned atop a mountain somewhere, looking down on a fairly spectacular vista.
Some multiple islands of sort.
Yes.
We should visit whatever this place is and do a live podcast from there, since it's now ingrained as part of the show.
What are you talking about? We're already here. This is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
don't spoil.
Those are windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful where we are. I'm just saying we should do it like on the island.
I think you're spoiling the mystique here.
All right, we're in the islands.
Kind of ruining it.
Coming to you live. Can we get to the NFC South now?
Yeah.
It's a great background, which is actually just it's
a broken window screen, I think.
It's a window screen. Yeah. It's great. All right, NFC South. I was going to give this, as a whole, the NFC South going through many changes except for the Bucs.
Yeah.
But we'll go team by team here.
Whose entire offseason is about trying to stay as intact as possible. No changes. Nothing. We got it right. Change nothing.
Saints were the best team in the NFL. They're losing a lot of their good players. Falcons in rebuild mode. Carolina continuing their rebuild, and Tampa trying to run it back. So that's it.
Done.
But let's fix all of those teams, even the champion Bucs. So let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. They perennial underachievers for us. They are, the argument against us saying go get a top 8 quarterback feels like the Falcons fans could throw that in our face. It worked for the most part, but when Matt Ryan hasn't had everything around him, hasn't been great. And that's been the last couple of years. Since their Super Bowl run, roster has been on the decline.
Yeah, not ideal for them. They have a lot of work to do. Matt Ryan is still, I think, playing well, but not spectacularly, not at that MVP level he reached when he got Kyle Shanahan as his offensive mastermind behind the scenes. Now it's just, poor old Matt Ryan and a battered up Julio Jones who's probably getting towards the end of his career, at least on the downslope. And they haven't done a fantastic job of patching things up around him.
So let's start with Matt Ryan, because the Falcons are sitting there at number 4 overall. No, it's not working for me, Sam. The thing you're sending me is not. Oh, yeah. Good way to pass it on. That was supposed to be just typed, and I said it out loud.
You did. You're bad at this.
Very unprofessional again. Matt Ryan, he's going to be 36. Wow, that's old.
It is old.
In the year that I turned 39.
That being said, it's old in this realm of aging quarterbacks seemingly going on forever. I mean, Drew Brees has discovered the wall, and it's at like 42. Tom Brady is 43 and is yet to discover the wall.
52.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers is 37, 8, and he's fine, like best season he's ever had. So Matt Ryan has reached the age where quarterbacks used to be hitting the wall and getting concerning and falling off a cliff in terms of play style. It's where all those sort of great old quarterbacks hit that decline. But is it now? Like, is that just old modality of quarterback physiology, or have they pushed beyond that now because of modern nutrition and recovery and all those kinds of things?
I feel like we are getting at least more evidence to play with, right? There are more guys playing when they're 37 through 40 than I think there were previously. So we'll have more information on that. Matt Ryan, definitely an interesting case, because as of a few years ago, 2016, our number 2 graded quarterback, that was his MVP season, 92 grade. Then he had an 88 grade in 2017. The stats weren't even close, but we had a lot of bad interception luck. He had a butt pick that year. Remember? Butt pick, 2017. Yeah. But slow decline, 84 grade in 2018. So it kind of came down a little bit. Went down again in 2019 to 76. In 2020, it bounced back up to 83, but I think the way it was constructed was even a little concerning. He had 5 games at 65 or lower, and he had 5 games at 83 plus. Like, it was kind of, he had 5 or 6 games where he was really, really good, 5 or 6 games where he wasn't all that good. So I think it's still a concern as to like what he is, but he's a guy that you can win with. Bottom line, though, the Falcons still have to be looking to the future. So at number 4 overall are the Falcons in the quarterback market, because money-wise, you definitely can't release Matt Ryan right now. But before 2022, you start to get into a little bit of dead money and a little bit of savings. This could be his last year. Do you get the quarterback now?
This is a little bit like when the Giants had the number 2 overall pick and they chose Saquon Barkley. The main discussion was, okay, are you ever going to have a better shot at a quarterback than right now? Now, look, when you look at the players actually available and how they've all panned out, you can actually make the argument that, hey, maybe they were right to avoid a quarterback. They haven't exactly panned out beyond that, or at least the ones that were in the discussion there. But the point is,
should have got Josh Allen.
Right. You're picking at number 2. The last time you picked at number 2 was like 1981 or something insane, right? The chances of you picking there again in the near future are not that high. Atlanta, I think, is in a vaguely similar boat. Number 4 is a really high pick to have in a year where there's a lot of quarterbacks available and potentially you have a shot of one of the best ones. You have to ask yourself, when's the next time that opportunity is going to come around again? Because what you don't want is to be in this world where New England is, where your quarterback walked out the door or retired or got too old and you didn't have a viable contingency plan and you don't have a shot at a new one. So I think they have to be asking the question, or at least, making sure that they're prepared for that pick. Like when the quarterbacks are picked in front of us, number 4 comes up, these are the 2 guys on the board. Do we like either of these guys enough to draft them here?
Yeah, our board, of course, Trevor Lawrence, number 1, Zach Wilson, number 2. If for some reason the Jets decide to pass on Zach Wilson and he's there at 4, we would obviously take him. Number 3 on our board is Justin Fields. He's the interesting name. I know I was linking him to the Eagles. This isn't like Will Fuller. I'm not going to put him on every team, but it's a debate, right? All these guys could be available in the top 10. Yeah. Justin Fields, when you watch his game, there's a lot of Ryan Tannehill to his game as well. I mentioned he reminded me of Carson Wentz watching his prospect film. But if you look at Tannehill, who had trouble taking too many sacks earlier in his career, much like Fields. But you also look at Tannehill, the athleticism, similar to Fields, and just the pure accuracy. Even though Tannehill had this uneven career in Miami, he was still an above-average quarterback for the most part, and he would just throw a beautiful ball, like outside the numbers, deep out, deep comeback. accurate passer, one of the more accurate passers in the league. It was always just like a pocket presence and kind of like an it issue with Tannehill. Just never elevated his team until he got to Tennessee.
Yeah.
I see a lot of similarities with Justin Fields, and I'm only making that comparison because Arthur Smith is the new head coach. That was the guy who got Tannehill's career back on track in Tennessee.
I don't hate that comparison at all, actually. It's the first time I've heard it.
It just came to me.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well done.
Thanks.
I do like that. I think it's going to be the most interesting evaluation of the group. Actually, there's a lot of very interesting evaluations of this group. It's a really fascinating quarterback class in the first round. Trevor Lawrence is the one that I think there's just there's nothing interesting to be said. Trevor Lawrence is fantastic, has been since day one in college, probably will be very good in the NFL. He's the easiest, cleanest evaluation. There's nothing more to be said here. Zach Wilson, there's a lot of interesting discussion. Just how high is his ceiling? How much do you ding him for the fact that he was never under pressure at BYU? And there's only really one season, and he's built like me, which is probably an issue at some point. And he's got an injury history built like me. So that's always something that scares NFL teams. Justin Fields is a really fascinating eval because, again, we've talked about this before. It's sort of how you phrase it. People are concerned about his ability to process or get to his second and third read, et cetera, versus whether the offense just sort of made him look that way. But there are data points that say just that ability to process or take too many sacks or that slowdown seems to manifest itself in a few different ways, which is an issue. And then Trey Lance with like all the chaos that he brings of small school, relatively small sample size, crazy athleticism, doesn't have quite the same passing resume as some of these other guys have. And then Mac Jones, the last one, I think that's a really interesting candidate who actual tape is pretty crazy, but you get the how much did that Alabama offense basically manufacture Mac Jones the same way it potentially manufactured Tua, et cetera, et cetera. So this entire quarterback group is really interesting to talk about. And because of that, you have to assume that every single NFL team is going to have those guys ordered differently.
Right.
There are going to be guys out there in NFL rooms that have the same take as Chris Sims and have Zach Wilson number one, Kellen Mond number
my
four.
lines.
Whatever.
It's true, though.
As much as like we mock these people for it, there's 32 NFL teams out there, and we know all too acutely there's 32 levels of competency and crazy in those buildings. There are people sitting in those NFL rooms right now making those same arguments. Now, they may get shouted down by people whose jobs are on the line and who potentially know better, but these are opinions that are held in those rooms, which means when pick number 4 or pick number 6 come up, like these are the arguments that have been had or are being had when that happens.
So as we talk through this, here's what I'm thinking might be the best scenario for the Falcons.
Yes.
Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, no matter what crazy takes there are, they're
Probably
the consensus top 2, right?
Yeah.
I would say because there is so much question between Fields and Lance and Mac Jones or whatever, what about just trading down, assuming somebody's going to love one of those guys? Obviously, we're just going to say every team should trade down. But from the Falcons, we're talking about a best-case scenario here. Trade down, accumulate more draft picks, of course, and then take whichever quarterback is left. So you're hedging a little bit. You're getting a quarterback to at least see, get him in the building, see if he could be the next guy. You get that ball rolling, but you also get the extra draft capital to improve the roster right now, because that's the part I want to get to. The rest of the roster is in shambles. A couple years ago.
Shambles, good word.
Right? The Falcons roster a couple years ago, every year, I say this every year, there's teams that you put mock drafts together and it's like, they don't have a ton of needs. Like, where do I go? Yeah. And then like the next year, it's like, man, they got 17 holes to fill. Like that was the Falcons. All of a sudden, offensive line needed an overhaul and they invested there. Then the secondary fell apart. They've been looking for a good edge rusher for 15 years, it seems. So there's a lot of holes to fill. Getting more draft picks, but also hedging and maybe getting a quarterback, I think, is the play here for the Falcons.
So how far are you trading down and snagging a quarterback in an ideal world?
I think so. The Lions and the Panthers are two prime candidates to potentially trade up. Right. Lions have extra draft capital. Panthers are in desperate need of a quarterback based off their offseason actions. They are a division opponent, so I always am wary of that. I don't see those things happening as often. But I feel like 8 or 9 or 10 is a spot where, like, I know people are saying, hey, Mac Jones might not make it past 8, but, like, we really think 5 quarterbacks are going to go
in the first, like
or is Mac Jones QB3 or QB4 for
that's
people?
the thing, right? That's the argument, I think, is that it's not that all 5 of those guys are going to go in the first 8 picks. It's that Carolina potentially, or another team, loves Mac Jones to the point where they think he's the 3rd best quarterback in the class, maybe even the 2nd.
I think Carolina, you mentioned them. When I'm watching Mac Jones, I was like, Teddy Bridgewater. When watching Mac Jones, I got Teddy Bridgewater vibes, and I don't think Carolina is now trying to move on from Teddy after a year with him. I don't know. I mean, they'd have to see the same thing through my eyes, but I don't know if they're enthralled with a Mac Jones.
No, but they could also see him as Teddy Bridgewater plus,
plus on a cheap deal and all that.
Yeah, but even if he's stylistically similar, if he's better, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I know, that's true.
They acquired Teddy Bridgewater. They don't dislike a lot of what he brings to the table.
Equate.
Yeah, well, exactly, Steve. Comparison, not equate.
Not equate.
They like a lot of what Teddy Bridgewater brings to the table. They've just evaluated it over a season and decided that it doesn't go far enough. But if Mac Jones is stylistically similar but better, it's potentially exactly what they're looking for, which is maybe why people are saying Mac Jones won't last beyond 8.
So I think that's what I would do if I'm the Falcons from a draft perspective. I have a feeling teams don't always love to get the quarterback a year early. It's just not necessarily in their nature. So I don't know if they're going to go that way, which puts them at number 4 overall.
Where do you stand now on this concept of like 2nd and 3rd round quarterbacks? Because it almost feels like those have died out as a concept. It used to be where you took the guys that were, projects, toolsy, had some question marks. Now, if you've got any shot of being a viable franchise quarterback, you're going in the first round. And if you're not going in the first round, you probably don't really have a great shot of being anything beyond a backup in the NFL. So if you're Atlanta and it's like, all right, Matt Ryan's getting old. Also, quarterbacks are playing older. We don't really know where we stand on this. So we don't want to take a quarterback at number 4 overall because, as you pointed out, this roster is in pieces and needs quite a lot thrown at it. So we kind of want number 4, or at least the ammunition that number 4 provides for us. So I agree with you. Let's trade back, right? Let's go to Detroit at 7. Let's go to Denver at 9 if Denver wants to get aggressive for a Drew Lock replacement. Let's go down that way. Let's get ourselves that number 9 pick. We still have a top 10 pick to spend, and we get extra picks in this draft, whatever that works out being. Instead of taking a quarterback at 9, what if we take a 2nd or a 3rd round quarterback? We go for a Kyle Trask or someone that had like a really good season this year.
Kellen Mond.
Yes.
If he lasts past 12.
Yeah, of course. Kyle Trask's season kind of out of nowhere. Like even if you go back a year and watch him, it's a very different quarterback. In particular, one of the reasons I know that is because I was trying to work out why Kyle Pitts' grade wasn't as good the year before as the 96 that he put up this season. You're like, oh, his quarterback sucked the year before.
No, Trask wasn't that bad.
Oh, he was.
Wasn't.
You watch Pitts' targets the year before, and it's like, no, this is the difference.
Made a few bad decisions.
Anyway, my point is, fairly well came out of nowhere and had a really good season, but is not seen in this first round conversation, really. Is he a candidate to sort of take, all right, we trade back, we get an extra pick, and with the extra bonus pick, we take the quarterback just to hedge?
Trask?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Or Mond, or whatever you want to put in there.
No, I don't hate that as a strategy because Kyle Pitts, who you mentioned, would be really nice for this Falcons team at 7 or 9 or whatever it might be. I know it's easy to look at, hey, they got Julio and they got Calvin Ridley. They're set there.
You're never
more
set.
playmaker.
I mean,
You're never
this
set.
This is the NFL.
Never set a playmaker.
You cannot have too many playmakers. And, the Chiefs are a great example of that. And it's never going to be a bad thing to get. I mean, the Chiefs are also a great example of what happens where not only can you never have too many, but it becomes this sort of force multiplier to have more than you think you need, because now it's like, well, how do you stop that? And if you're going to be weak somewhere, you're almost better off being so absurdly good on one side and trying to get the other level just up to adequate than you are trying to balance it out and be like mediocre across the board. So if you're Atlanta and you're like, all right, we have a choice of Kyle Pitts or insert defender who'll make a marginal difference into a pretty terrible defense, take the offensive superstar and figure out defense later.
Especially when you're competing with the Bucs, who have that strategy. They have all those guys, or presumably Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski will be back, and they're going to run it back with 5-6 deep and playmakers to just put points on the board. So let me spin it around, not to spend the whole show on the Falcons. Let me spin it around really quickly. What if Arthur Smith, who just rejuvenated Ryan Tannehill's career, play-action heavy system, that he's going to run 6 to 8% more play-action probably than Matt Ryan ran last year. That was when Ryan had his great season under Shanahan, play-action heavy system in 2016, all that fun stuff. And he's only 6. What if you try to get 2 really good seasons out of Matt Ryan?
Yeah.
He still was a top 10 quarterback last year overall, even though it was an uneven season. What if you just try to get the most out of him? You still have Julio. You got Ridley. Add another playmaker in the first round potentially. The defense does need an overhaul. Dean Pease comes in to coordinate the defense. It'll be a complete change from the cover 3, sit back and get torched system.
Well, this is the thing about this age of quarterback is I think you just reach this level of uncertainty. It's not that Matt Ryan could go on. He could have a Tom Brady-esque career where he plays till 43 years old, and we don't see him start to decline in any real sense in for 5 years. On the other hand, he could be on the precipice of that right now, and he's going to react the same way that Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers did, and that decline is really right there. And I think the problem is you just don't really know. So you just, once they hit this age, you're just constantly on edge in terms of when is the quarterback going to fall off, because it could happen now, could happen 5 years from now, and we're just hoping, fingers crossed.
So either way, I could see them building around Matt Ryan a little bit, hedging at quarterback, add a little bit more to the offense. The defense is going to get attacked. And I mentioned Dean Pease coming in. He last coordinated the Titans in 2019. It's from that Ravens tree where strategically we like how those teams are built, right? Even the 2019 Titans, they were 3 deep at cornerback, really good, much like the Ravens were. That's where the Falcons really need to attack, especially for the system or just strategically. Be good from back to front. What is happening in this building right now? Is that coming through?
Some pretty extensive, I would say construction, but that doesn't sound
it's really loud.
Constructive as much as destructive.
They're destroying something around here.
Yeah.
So they're going to attack this secondary. Last year they went A.J. Terrell, cornerback, in the first round. I mean, that's the other thing. They might need to double up at corner again just to get A.J. Terrell some friends in the back 7 there.
Some friends. Yeah, their problem is they don't have a lot of cap space. In fact, they don't have any cap space as of right now. They're significantly over the cap. So this is not going to be a free spending team in free agency. You might be able to do a little bit of business on the second wave of free agents, the lower price potential bargains. And I think, to be fair, it is not a bad free agent period to be in that situation, particularly at cornerback. If that's your need, there's a lot of corners available with some potential talent that might go for not an awful lot of money. And you might be in that market, maybe even for a couple of these guys, and see if you can get some plus play out of some of them, particularly in the slot. Guys like K'Wan Williams has been one of the better slot corners in the NFL at times. Mackenzie Alexander's got a really good season. Nickel Roby-Coleman's got good seasons. Those guys are not going to be going for much money. Maybe even take a couple of them for barely minimum deals and try and figure out one of them making a plus contribution. And the same's true with outside corners. There's some value there as well. So target a couple of those guys for very small amounts of money and see if you can upgrade.
Malcolm Butler just hit the market. He played with Tennessee under Dean Pease a couple years ago. I mean, look, I think this cornerback market, I've made the statement before, some team's going to sign 2 guys and they're going to hit, or one of them's going to hit, and it is going to be a game changer for their particular season for next year. The Falcons could be that team. Throw a couple resources at some corners. The offense is always good. It's going to be good. And then if the defense just creeps back toward average, they're in the mix. So Falcons, be thrifty, build around Matt Ryan in the short term, think quarterback long term, and get some more pass rushers in there. They might need to cut Dante Fowler too, because they overpaid for him badly.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some work to do to make the cap.
Sack
so
totals.
He's an obvious candidate. Could be gone by the time you listen to this.
Possibly, to get under the cap. All right, Atlanta, fixed-ish. Carolina Panthers, they might be a longer fix. The thing I'm most interested in about the Carolina Panthers this offseason is how active they've been in the quarterback market, right? They were very much in the Matthew Stafford.
Reportedly. We don't really know.
Oh, I buy into all of it.
Oh, you? Yeah, okay.
I think that's all true.
All right, fair enough.
Reportedly in every quarterback discussion. But that's
isn't that a red flag in and of itself?
No.
You can't possibly have been enamored with every available quarterback so far.
Matthew Stafford, Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Like, stop me when one of these guys isn't an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater.
That's not the point. The point is how big an upgrade and how much are you giving up to get it?
Matthew Stafford, Carson Wentz,
I mean,
Derek Carr. I mean,
we
who
made
else?
the point that Matthew Stafford wasn't a seismic upgrade over Jared Goff.
Right?
Like in a massively beneficial system with the Rams. Is it that is Carson Wentz last year was no better than Teddy Bridgewater?
I think,
And he's not being reunited with Frank Reich in Carolina.
I think they're just doing their due diligence.
Well, that's different to being in the market, isn't it?
I think they have the makings of being a smart organization. The new regime here, smart organization that is doing their due diligence at the quarterback position. Perhaps they paid Teddy a little bit too much on the open market last year, but even at that time, we said bridge quarterback. That's what he is. That's what they treated him as. I thought that they would consider quarterbacks in the first round last year. They probably will again this year. And, I think that's fine. I mean, they are strategically moving in the direction that we would move, No stone left unturned looking for your next quarterback, with the one mistake perhaps being a little bit too much invested in Teddy along the way.
Okay. So fixing them starts with their quarterback. Who are you giving them?
Well, I think they're going to draft. Again, the Fields or Lance or whoever ends up.
Okay, well, that's
being
not a hedge.
available.
Who are they going to take?
Trey Lance.
Trey Lance is the guy that they covet at number 8.
He's the guy that's going to sit behind. I'm trying to read into.
If they're so desperate for a quarterback, surely they don't want Bridgewater starting another year.
Yeah, but I think because Bridgewater, on the Alex Smith conservative spectrum, and not a carry the team guy, more of a distributor type. I think how you go from like the player friendly coach to the crazy coach, and you kind of cycle back and forth. I could see them trying to go for the high upside play, which is a Trey Lance, Justin Fields type,
and start him day one.
And no, not necessarily sit behind Bridgewater this year.
I don't think they're going to want to do that though. Like, I don't
have some patience.
If they're this desperate for a quarterback to the point where they've allegedly been in the market for every one of them, regardless of how significant an upgrade, that says they don't really want Teddy Bridgewater taking snaps next year.
Yeah. The intriguing part is their playmakers. Now, I know we've given Kyle Pitts to everyone too. My favorite fit might be the Panthers for Kyle Pitts, just because having DJ Moore, having Robbie Anderson, and I love the way they used Robbie Anderson last year inside in the slot. They turned him from just pure deep threat early, which is what he was with the Jets, to, hey, he could be an all-around receiver plus a deep threat. Having Pitts as the third guy when the Panthers might have the worst tight end situation in the NFL anyway, I think would be great.
Do you not know of the New England Patriots, sir?
What's that?
Do you not know of the New England Patriots, sir?
Oh, yeah. The Bengals are in the mix too. Like, there's 5 teams that have the worst tight end situation in the NFL. I ranked them last year, I remember. There was 5 teams I tried to put at 32, and they said you can't do that. You can't have them all tied for 32nd. So the Panthers are in the mix too. So Pitts would be great.
Would you like a good data point to back up your Robbie Anderson thing?
Yes.
So Robbie Anderson, pure deep threat. Last few years, average depth of target with the Jets. 16.9, 13.6, 17.3, 15.8. First year in Carolina, 9.8. 5, 6, 7 yards on average per target less than with the Jets.
And still really productive.
Sure.
But my point is he could do anything, right? He could do either thing.
I mean, his most productive season by yardage and catches and targets and completion rate and everything except touchdowns.
You know what might be the unexciting thing, though, that has to happen in Carolina?
What?
They don't have a QB that they love. They just franchised Taylor Mouton as their franchise player. They're bringing him back. He's the starting right tackle. Starting left tackle Russell Okung is a free agent. They might have to just draft Rashawn Slater or Penei Sewell, whoever's there, and it's unexciting. But here's what it would be in line with. Remember last year they drafted all defense. Derek Brown was their first pick. They started in the trenches and built back. 2 guys on the defensive line. I could see them saying, all right, we're resetting the offense now. Back to the trenches. If Penei Sewell drops or if Rashawn Slater's there, that's their unexciting first top 10 pick.
You would definitely expect them to dedicate most of this draft to the offensive side, having
Correct.
done the exact opposite last time, right? That they're not going to double up or probably not even be completely balanced in terms of offense, defense.
Though they still need help on defense, obviously.
Yeah, because you can throw 10 picks at it, but they're not all going to pan out. And if you needed more than like 2 or 3 players on defense, which they did, you're probably still going to have some work to do.
Yeah, some of those young guys, Jeremy Chin, I thought showed flashes. He wasn't as good as like the stats showed, but his role was difficult. You know, they've got some promise on defense, but still a lot of holes on this roster. So I think they're going to be either on the thrifty left tackle market, or they might have to spend a first-round pick. And then I think from a quarterback standpoint, it's Teddy and a developmental guy, whoever that is.
What do you think they even want in a quarterback? Because you've got this combination of Rule and then Joe Brady coming from the LSU offense, the Saints offense before that. But the quarterbacks there are, Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, Joe Burrow. Like, it's an interesting group of quarterbacks that they have had and you would assume sort of set you up as the template for what you're looking for. It's not the sort of typical quarterback in terms of what is coming to the market, I guess, at the moment in terms of draft prospects.
I think it's, if you look at Burrow and Breeze, I know one played in college, one played in the NFL, but it's guys that you can attack every level of the field, short and intermediate accurate, right? But have enough arm to get it up the seam and aggressiveness to get it up the seam. I mean, that's where I think Teddy was lacking. I thought short area accuracy wasn't great last year. You mentioned Robbie Anderson cutting 6 yards per target off of his average. They're trying to get guys in space, much like the Saints, right? You're stretching teams horizontally, you're stretching them vertically. LSU did it great, the Saints did it great. So you need a quarterback that's flying through decisions, getting the ball and catch and run opportunities, and taking shots when he needs to. I may have just described Mac Jones. I mean, to your point, like, if he's a better version of Teddy Bridgewater, maybe Mac Jones is the developmental guy. I don't want to pigeonhole developmental guy into like just an athletic guy, right? It could be Mac Jones too, who has all of the quarterbacking tools. But I wonder if they're just like, man, Teddy just doesn't. The same thing the Rams moved on from Goff because of, right? It doesn't do enough out of structure. Bridgewater doesn't do enough out of structure. So maybe they don't want to go that way with Mac Jones.
I mean, the description you gave sounds the most like Zach Wilson to me.
I could see
from your description.
I could see them trading up for sure.
That's the quarterback that it sounds closest to. And if you assume that the standard given in this entire draft process is that Lawrence is going number 1, Wilson would be the one in that group that you could potentially target with a trade.
Looking at the Panthers roster, you mentioned, hey, they spent every pick on defense last year.
Yes.
But in part, it was because the offense has some really good pieces. Playmaker, offensive line was solid. Got some holes to patch. You got McCaffrey at running back. The offense is still solid coming into this year. So if they did package picks to just go get a quarterback and then just say, look, we're running it back with our young defense. We're going to get into year 2 with all those guys. Some of them are going to develop. Derek Brown's going to develop. Jeremy Chin's going to be there. All this stuff. Troy Pride. I could see that being the strategy. Go all in on quarterback. Go get your guy. Make it if it's a Zach Wilson at 2 for the Jets, if you can talk them out of it, I could see that being the play if it's available.
Yeah, I mean, because they've been reportedly interested in all these quarterbacks, it would be really interesting if they got aggressive in the draft and went after the one that they want, as opposed to, jump up a space or 2 or hope one falls to where we are. Like, okay, let's go all in for this. Let's actually attack what your vision of a quarterback is, and let's really make some noise. Let's go after a Zach Wilson.
All right, so let's go through the rest of this roster and where they need upgrades. We always talk about wide receivers and corners. At cornerback, Troy Pride, they drafted last year, 39 grade. Jeremy Chin was a safety / corner / linebacker. Love it. Very forward-looking approach defensively, positionless football type. I think he's going to be okay. Pretty good player. Mm-hmm. But you have Dante Jackson on the roster. He's the only corner that graded above 60. Rasul Douglas was a 60.3, so above 60.3. How much we've mentioned Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn. That could be the play too, even though they went defense last year. Like, you still need guys on the back end, and you have to cover all the Bucs and Falcons guys every year.
Yeah. I mean, yes, they probably have more needs than they have ability to address them.
Man, I want to give them everybody. Micah Parsons to replace Luke Kuechly.
Right. But at some point, I mean, you got to start ticking this off in hierarchical order, right? Which starts with the quarterback. So identify the quarterback you want, go and get him, and figure out where the holes are elsewhere and deal with it later on. If Zach Wilson is the quarterback that they covet, they're not going to have the capacity to do much else. If Mac Jones is the quarterback they covet, maybe they can. Maybe they can stay at 8, draft him, and have the rest of their picks to play with. And they've got a couple of day 2 picks. That's where you maybe take a corner. And, okay, at that stage, you're not going to get a Caleb Farley. But, you can get the next wave of cornerbacks and still be able to address that position.
From a defensive line standpoint, Brian Burns emerged last year. We mentioned Derek Brown. He started to play much better after a slow start, much like he did at Auburn, kind of eased into it and then became a star by his final season. Yetur Gross-Matos was their second rounder last year. So I don't know how much else they're going to invest from a D-line perspective, given all these other holes. But, yeah, the Panthers have to just go best player at the most valuable positions and just keep building that way.
Yeah.
From a wide receiver standpoint, they're going to lose Curtis Samuel. Who knows where Kadarius Toney falls because of his rap videos or whatever came out. I don't know if he's going to be a first-round player or whatever like we had maybe guessed. But Toney and Rondale Moore would also be a nice Curtis Samuel replacement if they go that way, second round in the draft if they're available.
Yeah. The Panthers have a bit of space, salary cap space, so they could be players in free agency as well. Maybe not at the very height of the market, but lower down. And there's some players I think that you could target. I mean, Nelson Aguilar is one of those guys I think that's intriguing for a lot of teams because he's shown a very varied skill set, albeit in short stints, like 2 seasons. But Aguilar within that offense feels like he could do damage and do a lot of the things that Curtis Samuel did, not so much out of the backfield, but as a receiver and a gimmick weapon. He'd be, I think, an intriguing guy to take that spot and probably not for more money.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one for sure. So, look, Panthers offseason is all about what they do with the quarterback position. I think they're going to start Teddy and look to the future, add a little bit more to the offense. Got to figure out left tackle, either in free agency or the draft. I would prefer that they attack that in free agency, even if just getting like a Riley Reif in there, a creep back toward average type of guy to replace one of those guys in Russell Okung, I think would be fine. And then open up the ability to get playmakers at corner and figure out your quarterback situation if you have to package draft picks. Mm-hmm. All right, that's the Panthers. They're still a year away. I mean, here's the other thing from a Panthers perspective. Brady's got 1 year technically left. It's probably going to be a second that they're going to add. You're probably not necessarily going to compete this year, but you're looking to 2022 and saying Breeze is gone.
That's
Brady's going to be gone.
Just
Let's
get the
look.
quarterback and
Yeah.
be as aggressive as it needs to be to make it happen, because nothing you can do this year is going to put you in a contending spot next year. This is all about the year following that, where there's a very real chance you are the only team in the division with a quarterback at that point. And if you've nailed it, if you took a Zach Wilson and suddenly you have a young superstar quarterback, everyone else is now scrambling, trying to replace their aging veteran. And now you're back to being able to surround that guy with some talent. I think that's the move. Just identify the quarterback you love and go aggressively after it. Make it happen.
I wonder. Eric Fisher was just released today by the Chiefs. He's got injuries to deal with, but I just wonder with those like him and Riley Reif, like what are they going to go for on the market? Are you getting these guys for like $6 million? Or are they still going to get comparable money, but just from the teams that have money now rather than the teams that released them who are strapped?
Well, Fisher is interesting as well, because if we're talking about this as a 2-year project, essentially, that guy's tore his Achilles a couple of months ago. He's not playing anytime soon.
Right.
He's probably not a factor for 2021, or at least most of it. But if you're of the opinion that we're not even really building for 2021, maybe you can sign Fisher for a modest deal that actually focuses on the following year. He'd still only be 31 years old, I think, in a year's time. Like, maybe that's actually an intriguing player for them. Or maybe you just leave him languishing on the open market because he's got his torn Achilles and nobody else wants him, and get him later. But, they could potentially sign him knowing that he'll basically get redshirted next year, and then he'll be your left tackle when you actually want to contend.
Of all the teams in the NFL, I think the Panthers are an intriguing one this year, just because of the QB decision and the fact that they feel like just a team that's going to take a different approach in the coming years, and I want to see that strategy unlocked. in the coming weeks. All right, let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Other end of the spectrum here. Is the cap fake? Everybody, the Saints are like the poster children for that. The people that the cap is a myth. You know, the Saints just manipulate it every single year.
Well, ironically, they're the poster child for it from both camps of the argument.
I'm trying to push the PFF NFL Daily here.
I know, but you hadn't got there yet, so,
Okay.
Get on with it.
We did a PFF NFL Daily today on is the salary cap a myth? Go check it out. If you haven't subscribed yet, go do it.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Well
PFF NFL Daily.
Eventually.
So the Saints, as of recording, they just released Janoris Jenkins before we recorded. You can see the time over here, too, on our, if you're on YouTube, you can see the recording time from our
but the weird thing
island.
is the Saints are like the poster child of the salary cap is a myth from both sides of the argument. The people that say it is a myth are like the Saints. They're a million. They're like the Saints are like $50 million over the cap every single season. It never matters. Like, what are we doing here? Well, the salary cap is fake. It's ridiculous. And then the people are like, no, the salary cap isn't a myth. There are very real consequences. Point to like today and yesterday. It's like, okay, yeah, but the Saints have to cut half their roster before the league year to get under the cap every single season. So it does have an effect. It does cause you problems. But I think ultimately that's just the way the Saints operate.
Yeah, so Janoris Jenkins was the most recent release. We've seen Jared Cook get released. We've seen Quan Alexander. They did manage to franchise tag Marcus Williams, bringing him back at safety. So they're very good secondary, largely intact, minus cornerback 2 in Janoris. And look, Trey Hendrickson's a free agent, pass rusher. The big question for the Saints is how much of this depth can they lose, still be competitive? How much do they have to rely on their draft class? I always reference their 2017 draft class. That was a franchise changer. That was Marcus Williams, who I mentioned, Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Kamara, Trey Hendrickson. Franchise changer. Can't bank on that, but you're going to need some contribution from your draft class. And then what do they do at quarterback? Presumably, Drew Brees is going to retire post June 1st for cap relief, presumably. And then is it Jameis's team? And they still have, as of recording time, more cap space to free up. They can probably get there, by all accounts, by just restructuring some of their stars, continue to push it into future years, and then maybe one or two other releases.
Also, free agent Jameis.
Free agent Jameis Winston.
If he's the answer, at some point they actually need to re-sign him.
So he's at least $10 million.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Taysom's making a ton.
Yeah, Taysom's making a lot of money, but like they just signed Jameis for like a bag of peanuts last year.
That can't be happening again if he's the starter.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that's such a weird negotiation. It's like you couldn't get a job this time a year ago. We signed you for nothing to come in and be our third quarterback. You're the same human being. You did nothing different in the last 12 months to change that value, but now we actually need a quarterback, so you're the starter, so your asking price is $15+ million.
But I don't know how much leverage Jameis has.
That's what I'm saying. So how does that's such a weird negotiation.
It is.
Can he just turn around and say, I have done literally nothing since the last time I signed here for like $1 million, but I want 15 because you need a quarterback? Does that work? Is that possible?
See, I don't think it works only because of the other teams that are in need of a quarterback. So I'm looking at.
But if he does that, what's their move? They say no,
Taysom,
presumably, and then they roll with Taysom?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And there's a couple ways to read that. For all of the he's Steve Young talk,
yeah.
The fact that the
2.0.
The fact that all Saints insiders are expecting Jameis to be the guy.
Yes.
Does that mean it was all fake, or they saw something in the 4 games that said, well, he can't be the guy? Because I don't think it was that bad. I think Taysom played as expected in those few games. Some good, some bad.
His biggest problem in those games was fumbling. Ironically, the thing that he was worst at was the thing that was housed in the area of play that he's supposed to be good at. Like running the ball and being an extra dimensional weapon. Like he just kept fumbling it. If you didn't do that, he actually passed the ball fine.
Know what I would do?
Not perfect, but
you ready for this?
Oh, God.
If I'm Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew?
Yeah.
Why?
I think we need to start giving Minshew some credit for what he did.
We tried to do that, and then he played badly enough to put himself on the bench.
Fine. But that's what he should have done anyway. Like, he should have played at that level.
Like, we were just on the precipice of giving him more credit than we'd given him before, and then he crapped himself.
It's still a small sample of it. At a macro view, we sit here for 2 hours per show and we give every team every good wide receiver, and you're going to get Will Fuller, and you're going to get Will Fuller, and everybody's getting receivers and tight ends, and that's the only way to build a team, right? Because it is the best way to build a team. But from a macro view, if we go back and look at Gardner Minshew's a year and a half as the starting quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, throwing to DJ Chark and no one else, with a bottom 10 offensive line, grading at 70 as a rookie, 67 last year. Not great, but not bad. Statistically, fine. That's impressive. We need to start looking at that as extremely impressive. A bad Jacksonville team in 6th round pick, Gardner Minshew, elevated them with no good playmakers, no elite play caller, nothing. If you paired him with Sean Payton, and I'm not saying he's like Drew Brees because he's 6'1" and he doesn't have a great, I'm not even comparing him to Drew Brees. But what do you think Sean Payton could get out of Gardner Minshew? And could it be even better than what he could get out of a Jameis or Taysom Hill?
I doubt it.
Come on, you're like anti-Jameis guy. You should love this.
Yeah. I look, here's the thing. I don't know that any of the names you listed give you any shot of winning a Super Bowl, which is probably the bottom line in all of this. Like, if Drew Brees does quit, and I think we should probably at least mention the idea that isn't a foregone conclusion. As much as everyone thinks he's probably going to retire, like the longer this, we said this before, the longer this plays out, the more he's going to start twitching and think, I could give this one more go.
It's the June 1st thing, right? Is it?
That's certainly.
I mean, you can announce it any time, but.
Yes. But my point is that everybody is going to be invested in letting this play out because it'll go past these deadlines of new year and all this kind of stuff. There's no reason to do it now, so it will drag on for a while. But the longer it drags on, I think the higher the chance is that he decides he's got one more year in him. Like, this didn't end the way I wanted it to end. Yeah, these guys are all mental. Like, they can't walk away on a year like that. It's not in their makeup. Like, the thing that makes them as good as they are is the unshakable, ironclad belief that they can beat the odds, including the odds of, Father Time has one icy, cold hand around your ankle and is dragging you into the pit of aging, decrepitude. Drew Brees is going to look at that and say, I can beat it. I've done it before. I can do it again. Yeah, Nobody thought I could play when I had the shoulder thing. I'm going to come back. I'm going to show him.
I think you're wasting your time.
I just think there's everyone's assuming he's gone. I think there's a very real chance when we get into the summer, he's going to think, I can do this again.
Well, we're running this podcast assuming he's gone.
Okay, well then they're just screwed.
And I'm not saying Minshew is the answer. I'm saying on a cheap backup contract.
A backup contract?
No, he's currently on a cheap contract and he's about to be a backup in a month, right? I would try to get him on the cheap and just throw him into the mix. And I think his shot might be comparable to Jameis's. I mean,
So you just want to throw a bunch of no-hope quarterbacks at this and hope that one of them gives you something?
Correct.
Okay. It almost feels like Sean Payton at this point is just kind of bored and trying to, let's see what I can create with a Taysom. Let's see what I can create with Jameis. Just give me a random quarterback. I'm going to see what kind of offense I can craft around him and see how we go.
Yeah. I mean, so let's say Jameis is the guy. The big question on this roster now with Jameis, you lose. Emmanuel Sanders got released. So who's wide receiver 2? Traquan Smith. Deontay Harris has that speed. Marquez Callaway. They showed some things. Those guys are better when Breeze is out there distributing the ball, though, too. The appeal to Jameis is when you give him Bucs-like wide receivers. Chuck it up to Mike Evans. Chuck it up to Chris Godwin. Take those chances. Be in an aggressive offense. That's how you get the most out of Jameis. I don't know if the Saints are equipped to do that anymore. Adam Trotman's the only tight end on the roster right now. I mean, that's the risky part because the supporting cast isn't necessarily there. You're banking on Sean Payton being play-calling genius here.
Well, yeah, what you're banking on is the concept that Sean Payton can fix Jameis Winston. Everybody knows Jameis Winston's issue. It's not that he was a catastrophic quarterback. Obviously, the guy passed for 5,000 yards. He had 30-plus touchdowns that year. But the 30 interceptions and the 40 turnover-worthy plays, those are numbers that are not workable. Now, you can look at that and say that's year one of a Bruce Arians offense. That's how that tends to go with those quarterbacks. Let's dismiss the 40 number and let's look at the earlier figures in his career. So that year with the 40 turnover-worthy plays, that was a turnover-worthy play rate of 5.4%. That's very high. Now, he threw less had less turnover-worthy plays in previous seasons, but he did have a season with a 5.3 turnover-worthy play rate, so the same, essentially. The year in between those two was 4.7. So generally, Jameis Winston is a pretty catastrophically turnover-worthy prone quarterback. The basic question is, can Sean Payton shrink that number? Because
a touch
4.5 to 5% is not really workable in terms of a good quality starting quarterback. We can't win with that long term. We can do some damage. We can win some games here and there where you don't do that. But if you're going to have a turnover-worthy play rate of 4.5 to 5%, we're not going where we need to go. That would basically rank the top of the league every single year.
I would say that the other piece of it is he's been top 5 in positively graded throws, not just Big Ten throws, all positives every year as starter.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you just you want to just run into some interception luck. Maybe the turnovers don't drop a ton. You just hope that they don't get caught as much. But if the positively graded throws are there, that's when offenses create value. That's when they generate value.
Sure.
And you just have to accept
but the whole point,
a high variance offense.
Yeah, but the whole point with Jameis Winston is it hasn't necessarily been that high variance. It's like, yes, you give us a ton of positive to the table, but you always ruin it with the turnovers. And that's and there's just too many. You are just, the flaw that you have, it's only one, but the flaw that you have is too big. And right now it undermines everything else you do, which actually is really good overall. Like your baseline in terms of good plays, big plays, it's all fantastic, but you ruin all of it by how often you put the ball in harm's way. So if Peyton can reduce that, and he doesn't even need to make it great. You know, Rodgers, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, those guys are down at 2% in terms of turnover-worthy plays. I don't need you to get there, but if you can get me to 3.
That's where last year Baker, Daniel Jones, Nick Foles, Mahomes, 3.2.
Which is quarterbacks that make mistakes, but not a huge amount of them, and they're not catastrophic to the point where it undermines everything. So if Peyton can just split that difference, I don't need you to become the most risk-averse quarterback in football. I just need you to get towards the middle of the pack somewhere. If he can do that, Jameis becomes a good quarterback. Not just average, not just viable, good. But that, I think, is a massive, completely unopened question.
Well, I want to see it. This will be great. I want to pose this question really quickly. It was posed to me on Mississippi radio with I do it every week, and they're Saints fans and Dak fans and all. So they're trying to figure out how many quarterbacks would you take before you first took a head coach, right? And who's that coach? And their question was essentially, do you put Andy Reid and Sean Payton and Belichick? Do you put them in the same bucket? And I argued I'd put Reid in a similar bucket as Belichick. Yeah. And Payton, I think, will learn more. Because with Reid, we knew that he'd elevate quarterbacks and offenses, and then he got Mahomes.
Yeah.
We've never really seen it the other way with Payton. A few games with Teddy, a few games with Taysom, but we're going to learn a lot about Sean Payton, right? And again, it's not is it Sean Payton versus Drew Brees? It's all right, everybody works together, but can Sean Payton do this with another quarterback and produce? We're going to learn a lot about him.
Do you have a good answer for that question?
I said you go 5 elite quarterbacks. You take your top 5, and then maybe you take Andy Reid. And then you take maybe another 5 quarterbacks, and maybe Belichick and Payton are in the mix.
So my answer
then it's a whole bunch of quarterbacks before coaches, right?
My answer was going to be that your first head coach comes in around the area where you reach the top of the second tier of quarterbacks. So the Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
When you've exhausted the elite quarterbacks, those guys that are going to grade above 90 and be legitimately transcendent talents, and now you're in the Dak Prescott realm, you're he's good, very good, he can win. We can win a Super Bowl with him, but he needs more help than those guys do. That's when I want Andy Reid.
This could be the Matt Ryan rule, too.
Yeah, same Matt Ryan same spot, tier. Right? Yeah. That whoever is the current top quarterback in that second tier, where there is a notable step away from the elite guys, I would rather have Andy Reid than that guy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, so I only brought it up because they were trying to say, is Peyton one of those guys? And I said, I just don't know if we're going to know yet until we see a year or two of non-Breeze evidence for Peyton. So other parts of the Saints roster, cornerback 2, opposite Marshawn Lattimore. Lattimore's PFF grade wasn't great, but you're talking about a guy that matches up against top wide receivers, shuts down big receivers like Mike Evans pretty consistently. He does have lulls, though. Like, he's not what he once was when he first came into the league, and he looked like the next great shutdown corner, Jalen Ramsey type. He hasn't played to that consistent level, but he's still really good. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the back. I mean, they've got a lot of good players in the secondary. But again, I think they're going to have to, like, late first round, are we looking at a corner as their, starting corner that they're going to be drafting, just like we talked about with some other teams?
Yeah, I mean, they should absolutely be in that cornerback market. Do you have a favorite of the group that would go there?
We keep talking, the top 3 we keep talking about: Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn. Let's assume that they're gone at that point. Asante Samuel Jr. is a lot like his dad, where it's like,
therefore a lot like Janoris.
A lot like Janoris, an opportunistic playmaker. And I think in this particular defense, when you're talking about Marshawn Lattimore being the guy that, like, has the reputation, you're going to avoid him a little bit. To maximize Asante Samuel's value, you either have him in a zone-heavy system or you have him kind of targeted a ton because he's going to pick some passes off. A lot like Janoris. There'll be some good, there'll be some bad. So I think, like, a proxy for just directly replacing him, Asante Samuel makes a little bit of sense.
I like that.
So what else from the Saints standpoint? Like, the roster's going to get worse. We're going to learn more about Sean Payton. I think he's just going to have to do a great job coaching this year, and we'll see what happens.
Well, they're also going to be in the market for those guys that they're going to be able to trade for, like the Quan Alexander deal a year ago, right? It's like a short-term rental. We'll trade for a guy. We'll bring him in knowing that he's going to be our cap casualty next year. I think they're going to be in the market for some of those guys where they try and bolster the roster, bring in some talent, and then know that it's just it's a one-year deal. He's gone next year because that's how the Saints are the team that, like, those people that live on their credit card and just pay the whole thing off every year. But, like, everything they buy is on the credit card, and then it racks up like a monster number. But as long as you keep paying it off, it's okay. You don't get, but if you don't, if you forget 1 week or 1 year, 1 month, or if you just don't make that payment, now you're getting hit with the giant interest and you're crippled. And that's how people wind up.
Did they forget?
No, I don't think they forget yet, but that's just how they operate. So you look at the giant credit card bill that comes through every month, and any normal person has a heart attack. But if you're one of those people that just operates that way, it's okay because you're paying it off and you move on to the next one. That's the Saints. It looks terrifying when you look at the final bill when it comes due, but that's just how they operate. They pay down the credit card and on they go.
All right, so Saints the number 2 team in this division still.
Yeah. I mean, until someone else shows otherwise, right?
Okay. I mean, that has flipped, right? The Saints were the better team than the Bucs.
Yeah,
both trended in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think you have to say they're certainly not the best team because the Bucs won the Super Bowl.
Right.
But even without a quarterback, or even without Drew Brees even with Drew Brees a quarterback, they're probably still better than the other 2 teams.
All right, let's go to the Bucs. Super Bowl champs. They're trying to run it back.
Pretty easy.
Yeah. Chris Godwin gets franchised, so he's back in there. As far as keeping their playmakers together, we're talking
David re-signed.
Levante David gets re-signed. That kind of like
still working on Shaq.
It was just like a quick announcement. Oh, by the way, Levante David's back.
Yeah.
They're trying to keep Shaq Barrett back. They're trying to bring him back.
Probably gets like Matt Milano paid because he's like the only linebacker available now.
I think people really might like KJ Wright, even though he's a little bit older. But yeah, Milano's our next guy on the board.
Yeah.
And Jayon Brown.
He's young.
Both guys are young and coverage first linebackers on the free agent market. Go check out PFF.com free agent rankings. They're all getting updated, so you guys know who we're talking about here. So Levante David back, Chris Godwin back. They're going to figure out Antonio Brown and Gronk, I assume. I don't know what happens with Antonio Brown. Does he actually try to hit the market and go to Seattle? Like, they were interested.
Certainly Gronk, I think, should be back. I mean, why would
he? Said he's just coming back. Like, that's what he wants to do.
Brown, I don't know. It's a weird free agent marketplace, and particularly for receivers. But Brown showed that he can still play at a really high level. And at a basic level, Antonio Brown is as good and talented as any wide receiver in the NFL, or certainly was in his prime. And I think he showed last year that his prime, he may not be right in the middle of it right now, but he certainly isn't far from it. Like, Antonio Brown is still Antonio Brown. He can still play. He's still got a lot to give. At which point, okay, he comes with a ton of baggage, but that's never stopped teams in the past. So does a team actually go, you know what? Antonio Brown is like the second best wide receiver in the open marketplace. we're going to have to need to structure this contract a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You can't just hand him a 5-year monster deal. We're going to have some outs in this. But do they say, yeah, let's actually target Antonio Brown as a legitimate upgrade at the position?
It's interesting because I loved the football move of getting Antonio Brown last year. I mentioned it on the show, and I think that came to fruition, right? There were games where he was the guy in the Super Bowl, catches a touchdown, right? So it was a good football move, having wide receiver 3. And when Mike Evans got hurt for a little bit or Godwin was hurt, you had Antonio Brown there. You still have Scotty Miller, the deep threat. Tyler Johnson showed flashes as a rookie. I think with Antonio Brown or without, they'll be okay. Maybe they continue to add more depth there, though, if they lose him. O.J. Howard could be a release just because they've been teasing that for years, and they still won it without him. He was looking pretty good early on, but if Gronk comes back and you get Cameron Brate, you're pretty good at tight end.
Brown had the best receiving grade of any receiver in that group on Tampa Bay last season.
That was because Godwin kept dropping passes.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but it's worth noting that of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, all those guys, Antonio Brown had the best grade, 86. Also had, I think, the best yards per route run figure as well, was the most efficient, essentially, in terms of generating yardage. So, yeah, Antonio Brown was an important part of that team, and I think would be again. But I'm curious if a team goes, well, yeah, you could go back there for not an awful lot and run it back and try and get another ring. On the other hand, how would you like to come here for $15 million?
Yeah, and I just don't know if other teams are going to do that or not, or if he wants to go back with his buddy Tom. I'm going to expect Antonio Brown goes back to the Bucs, along with Gronk. And now you're looking at the only real 2021 holes on the offense remain running back that can catch the ball. And I'm looking at James White in free agency, Brady's buddy, right? And even though Arians' system, he likes a running back that runs. He doesn't seem like the guy that's give me that third down back, even though they did it a little bit with LaShawn McCoy. But I could easily see them bringing in James White to make Tommy happy even more. And it's okay, there's going to be 2 or 3 games where James White catches 10 passes in a line, against a linebacker in a mismatch, and that's a valuable thing when you're talking about running it back as a Super Bowl champion. Yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense, and they can still keep the bruising early down back. This guy's just here for those situations where you need to go pass heavy, and catch a few passes, and at the moment you're throwing these hideous targets to Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, and they're not. Neither of those guys can really catch the ball.
They also had a, for whatever it's worth, pre-draft meeting with Demetric Felton, the running back / wide receiver from UCLA. So I think either way, you're talking about a team last year that went into the draft with specific needs: right tackle, safety, drafted Tristan Wirfs, drafted Antoine Winfield. What are there still specific needs that they're going to draft? Pass catching running back could be one of them. I could easily see them being the team that drafts a running back at 32 overall. Najee Harris is a really good receiving. I wouldn't do it. I could just see them saying we running backs a hole. Let's make that better. So I could see them doing that. I think it'd be a mistake, but the Bucs could be sitting there just saying, let's fill out the rest of the roster because everything else looks pretty good. Yeah, and all of a sudden it does. They do not have that many holes. Everything they did kind of panned out, assuming they get Shaq Barrett back, which is still a significant piece of outstanding business, but it's the one that they've been working on the longest, and therefore feels like they should be able to get done. Problem is they don't have the franchise tag to make sure now, so they do have a hard deadline to get that done. Otherwise, he's gone, hits the open market. But let's assume Shaq Barrett goes back. That gives them a high-level edge rusher to play with. You need to replace Ndamukong Suh along the defensive line, but you're getting Vita Vea back, which is going to be a big thing over most of last season where he missed. So you don't have that many holes. You got the secondary is young and talented, and they're all still there. You got Levante David coming back. You've got Devin White still there. This is a good roster top to bottom. If you are final question on the Bucs, because they're not a massive rebuild, obviously. Would you? Last year was kind of need-based drafting, and it worked. Would you start looking to the future, or look into depth, right? When it's one and the same, I think, right? But when Alex Kappa got hurt. Or was it Kappa?
Both
got hurt?
Yeah.
But when both guards got hurt, it opened up a big...
Not at the same time, but sequentially.
Elijah Vera Tucker is a great guard / tackle late first round that adds depth there and probably is a future starter. I think they can balance depth, wide receiver depth too, even though they're good, but are they going to let Chris Godwin walk in a year? I think there's a good short and long-term approach that they could take from a draft standpoint.
I think they're in that perfect situation where we say, look, you attack free agency to fill your needs, and then you get to roll into the draft and say, hey, just wake me when our pick's on the board, and we'll take the best player that's available to us, whoever it is, whatever position it is, we're fine. Doesn't matter that we don't have a glaring hole there. That's how you create the best possible team. I think the Bucs are in that great situation. They've got a couple of needs that they would like to address, but they don't have to chase it. So, they can sit in the first round, and if Vera Tucker is the guy they want to go with, sure, let's grab him. If it's a Najee Harris, they can grab him. Whoever it is, right? They have the luxury at that point of being able to just decide who the top player on their draft board is and pick him. They don't have to chase the hole that needs filling.
If they drafted Najee Harris or Travis Etienne or whatever running back at the end of the first round, we always are obligated to say that we hate it. But we started to talk, Clyde Edwards-Helaire will at least make the offense better. It's just another weapon and all that stuff. Do you believe that for the Bucs, or is it kind of a throwaway pick? Najee Harris is really good as a receiver.
Yeah. I mean, look, why my point would be the same, which is, sure, you could do that, but then you could also take James White in free agency for almost nothing and probably be better.
I agreed.
James White will probably be a better receiver than Najee Harris, certainly in year one, and you don't have to spend a first-round draft pick on getting him. So why would you? It just feels like a waste. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire thing went basically as well as we said it would, which is, he'll probably be a good player within this offense, but is it going to move the needle?
I would say the difference is that the Chiefs have a history of taking any running back and making him productive. The Bucs had maybe the worst pass-catching running backs last year. And if you're just talking about completeness, right? A complete offense, somebody who just catches the ball completes this offense. That isn't a hard skill set to find. You didn't. No, I wouldn't take it in the first round.
You didn't try particularly hard to find it, but it's not a difficult thing to add to your roster. Again, particularly when a James White is hitting free agency and he has a connection to Tom Brady, who has a history of drawing free agents to him like moths to a flame. So just grab those guys.
All right, Bucs. Fixed the Super Bowl champs. That wasn't tough.
It wasn't hard. Hashtag how hard can it be?
Quick break to tell you about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. If you like fantasy football and you like playing fantasy football for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team like you normally do, but that's it. This is my favorite, Sam. No in-season roster management. Underdog just automatically selects your best performers each week, saving loads of time. So go to Underdog Fantasy, deposit $10 using the promo code PFF. Oh, wow, I didn't realize this until I got to this part of the read. You get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. What? Promo code PFF. So you can get Edge annual right now for $10.
There you go.
At Underdog Fantasy. Well, this is the perfect time to get it. So it's like you get the draft guide.
Do you need
for $10
a free PFF Edge?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Perfect.
For $10. So go to Underdog Fantasy, put in $10, promo code PFF, and a free PFF Edge annual. That's a $40 value for just $10. That's it. That's good value by my math. All right, let's get to the NFC West. Arizona Cardinals, though, fighting J.J. Watts.
Fighting J.J. Watts.
Can we make it through the West in an hour?
I mean, we need to, right?
Give every team. Look, a 49er fan came out and said, just don't lose any steam by the NFC West.
Yes.
We have covered 28 teams. There's only 4 more to go, and we're going to give you just as much love as well.
Okay.
So let's do it.
Let's go.
Cardinals. What are we looking for? Kingsbury, Murray, year 3.
Yeah, big year for them. They're in a weird spot because I think a lot of people are quite down on the Arizona Cardinals overall. But it feels like if you just eliminate the way that the games actually fell in terms of wins and losses last year, even if you kept the record the same and looked at it relative to what we expected of them going into the year, aren't they about where you expected them to be?
Yeah, I think so.
So,
but this is the pivotal year, right?
Yes.
It's like, okay, it's year 3. Murray took a
but
step
everyone's
forward.
like,
This
is collapsing around them. Cliff Kingsbury's not a good coach. The thing is not working.
No, I think your take is fair.
Isn't that about where we expected Arizona to be? Okay, it went different. Like they were 5-2, and we thought they were much better than they actually were, and then it collapsed a little bit down the stretch. But I think that has warped perception too much. I think people now think, well, this whole thing is going south, as opposed to ultimately they finished about where they should have done. It's just that it started off well and went bad down the end.
My prediction, just the J.J. Watt deal was a start. Last year they traded for DeAndre Hopkins. If for nothing else, they've shown they're going to be aggressive. They're going to be aggressive. They're top 12 to 15 in cap space at the very moment right now. They're going to be aggressive, man. They're going to go after this thing. And I think they realize it's a pivotal year. So now what does that entail? Is that getting DeAndre Hopkins more friends? I know it's revamping the secondary because Patrick Peterson's a free agent and a shell of his former self. Robert Alford hasn't played in 2 years. He's a free agent. Drake Kirkpatrick, 49 grade last year. The entire secondary needs an overhaul. I think that's the place they need to attack. They got Watt, have Chandler Jones coming back, feel a lot better about their pass rush given that. Secondary, playmakers, as always, and then maybe some offensive line depth.
Yeah, there is a lot that needs work, I think, on this roster, and they don't have a ton of salary cap space to play with.
They're not bad. 21 million.
Yeah,
they're top 12,
but there's a lot
top 15
that needs fixing. I mean, there's not a lot of teams with a ton of cap space because the salary cap went down. So there's not a ton of free spending teams to have like this. It's going to be a weird free agent period because we're already seeing the amount of bloodletting that's getting done. Kansas City cutting their 2 starting tackles. Okay, they were both injured, but still, there are a lot of players that are getting cut for teams to get salary cap space. I don't know how many are going to be free spending in free agency because of that. So a team like Arizona, they have a lot of work to do, but I don't know how much real estate you have to make that happen.
Where would you go from? So cornerback is definitely the place that I want to start. The same thing I said about the Falcons, like a team that's going to invest in some free agent corners like Shaquille Griffin or just this boom or bust market. If they brought in Shaquille Griffin and Xavier Rhodes, I don't know. That's it. You keep Byron Murphy played pretty well in the slot last year, so you feel pretty good about him in the slot. But they need 2 legitimate outside corners, and that could be one free agent, 1 draft pick potentially if you're the Cardinals.
Yeah, that's tough because just generally your strike rate on talent acquisition is never 100%. So if you need 2 things, you probably need 3 people coming in for those 2 jobs, right?
So I think they have enough cap space to be in the Shaquille Griffin market, say. You go Shaquille Griffin, Jason Verrett, our favorite low-risk option, and then J.C. Horn at 16.
Would you put them in the William Jackson sweepstakes? Like, let's go big or go home. We need to fix this. At least one of these guys needs to be good.
I would.
So, okay, Shaquille Griffin is but Shaquille Griffin effectively is, he's not as good an option as William Jackson, right?
You could I think you could cut potentially Justin Pugh, save about $7.2 million. Jordan Hicks hasn't really been as good as they expected. They have Devon Kennard. They never really should have signed last year to play Sam linebacker, which isn't even really a position in the NFL. He could save $4 million. They have places where they could cut mediocrity and go big or go home. Honestly, that's what they feel like right now after that Watt deal, after Hopkins, or maybe they just like getting Texans on the cheap.
Maybe. William Jackson, I think, is he's the pinnacle of the cornerback market and free agency. And the cornerback market and free agency is chaos. It's madness. Everybody's got good seasons under their belt, just not necessarily the last one. And there's risk everywhere. The whole thing is ridiculous. William Jackson, there's risk attached to him, but I think he's the cleanest, the highest upside maybe, just the best combination of all those risk factors put together. He's prototypical size, 6 foot, almost 200 pounds, runs 4.3s, was a first-round pick. That's always big. And you've got to that first year has to mean something. I know it's now 4 years in the past, but the play that he had that year, I think, was too good to just be a random, flukish confluence of events. And a team has to be looking at that and say, there is an elite talent in this guy in the right environment. I think it's different to the Carson Wentz season, same year, ironically, where you look at it and say, well, this whole thing was built on a house of cards. It wasn't really representative of what he can do. That year, I think, was. There's no weird circumstances that just pushed William Jackson's performance through the roof in 2017.
No, he's awesome.
He gave up a completion rate of 35% that year, a passer rating of 36, had 11 pass breakups, held Antonio Brown without a catch across 2 games and 8 targets, and broke up 2 of those passes, I think. That season was absolutely ridiculous. Had a coverage grade of 90, and he's never really gotten near that since. 2 seasons with a coverage grade in the 70s, but he's still young. There's good play in his recent past. There's elite play not too long in the past. I think if you're looking, you need 2 corners, ideally, next season. Let's try and lock down one of them. Let's say William Jackson is going to guarantee that at least one of our cornerback spots is of a decent level. Let's throw the money at him.
See, that would remind me a little bit of the Panthers defense, potentially, from the Kuechly years, where they had like K1 Short up front, and then Kuechly at the linebacker level, Josh Norman at the cornerback level, Thomas Davis at linebacker too. But it was like, all right, you've got, say, 4 foundational pieces, and then you sprinkle in everything around them. Then you'd be talking about Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt up front. Isaiah Simmons needs to take that next step as your middle-of-the-field player, whether he's called a linebacker or a safety. And then you get William Jackson and Budda Baker as your foundations in the secondary. I love that as a strategy. So let's do it. Let's go all in on William Jackson. I think sitting at 16, I'd be tempted by defensive lineman Christian Barmore. I'd be tempted by the tackles, because last year we thought Josh Jones was a first-round caliber tackle. He lasted, how far? 3rd round? Or was it 5th round? I was trying to lose track. But they need a starting right tackle with Kelvin Beachum, pending free agent. Wouldn't mind even just bringing Beachum back if you can on the cheap. But maybe they're in the tackle market at 16. Maybe they're in the Christian Barmore market as another interior pass rusher to go with Watt and Chandler Jones. At 16, there's a couple different ways they could go, or you double up at corner. As I said, is J.C. Horn a guy there in the middle of the first, and you pair him with the William Jackson that we just signed? I mean, I think it's going to be an aggressive offseason for them. I think you could potentially, if you sign William Jackson, I think you're still very much in the market in the first round. I think you're still in the market in free agency, but now you're bringing in one of those gambles, whether it's your favorite Jason Verrett, whether it's guys, even just a Cameron Sutton, who's, I think, a safe gamble, but is probably his ceiling is limited, right? Or Brashad Breeland, same thing. He's a guy that everyone is looking to upgrade, but actually has been a fairly solid player over the past couple of seasons of starting, and that's valuable. You've got to be still in the market, whether they're the team that wants to snag a Ronald Darby or see if Xavier Rhodes can still play at a high level after this bounce-back year. There's so many different options, but I think William Jackson is your one splash play. Potentially draft a cornerback in the first round, certainly the first couple, and then try and double your odds of hitting by getting one of these gamble free agents later on. I like where your head's at with all those. Garion Conley is another intriguing one. For teams that are just playing man, I feel like he's going to end up in New England. They're going to trade Stephon Gilmore. Conley's going to become their next guy. Gilmore. Just playing man. Conley's splits when playing man versus zone are just really incredible. Yeah. So like in the right system, he could be pretty good. The problem with that, though, is that even these teams that are playing man all the time aren't really. I know. It's like 60% of the time. So I'm just trying to say, if you're going to maximize 40% of his snaps, he still needs to be able to do the stuff that he sucks at. He doesn't have a great feel there. I want to pose one other question here. They've been trying to attack this receiver thing for a while. Larry Fitzgerald, free agent / maybe retired. Christian Kirk has had his moments as a downfield threat. DeAndre Hopkins is what he is. One of the better all-around players. Maybe they limited him a little bit, in this air raid offense. Andy Isabella hasn't become the deep threat we had expected and or hoped. What if Jalen Waddle's there at 16? Speed threat opposite DeAndre Hopkins. Waddle... Or just get Will Fuller to go with Nuke. Or both. Think about that. Watson, you have Kyler thrown to those two guys. The Waddle is, the evaluation on him seems to be all over the place. We had Mike on a couple of weeks ago. Mike has him as wide receiver 2, right behind only Jamar Chase. People out there have him as wide receiver 1. I don't quite understand it, to be honest. I get he's fast and he can make big plays, which is, it's a pretty useful combination of things to be chasing. But I don't see how you can have him up there with the Jamar Chases or the Devontae Smiths of the world, because he doesn't do the same things that those guys have and never has. It would be like a huge projection
to say that he can step into those roles and do exactly the same things. That guy's entire life almost was spent in the slot against 10-yard off coverage, at which point being really fast enables you to run by a safety or a corner or whoever it is playing 10 yards off. And that guy, it's a no-win situation for him. You can't react to that with a two-way go backing up against a fast guy running right at you. You're just dead. You're dead in the water. You can't cover that. And that's most of his college career is doing that.
So it's an unknown more than anything.
Yeah, but it's an unknown versus very known quantities that were more productive.
So here's the bottom line, right? I think Kyler Murray, and I wrote this up in our QB annual, so if you just signed up for Underdog Fantasy for $10, you have PFF Edge. You also have access to the QB annual, so you can go check that out too. I wrote up Kyler Murray's next step is the intermediate level of the field. The middle of the field as well. He's short, doesn't always see the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. Has that actually been an issue? So last year I made the point about Aaron Rodgers not attacking the middle of the field enough and probably needing a Justin Jefferson type to unlock that from him, to like force him to throw to the middle of the field. Is that actually the most important thing for Kyler Murray? And if that's the case, who is that guy? Hopkins is a little bit like Hopkins is still more of like an outside the numbers type of threat, especially in this offense. Is a Marvin Jones that type of guy? Is Devontae Smith? I know it's at 16. Devontae's probably off the board, but like, is he the perfect fit for this offense, or is it that Waddle-esque speed guy? I need Murray to dominate that level of the field because that's where his biggest weakness has been.
I think yards. Devontae Smith would be perfect for that if he lasts that far. Which
do you go get him?
Huh?
Go get him?
Well, or you don't need to. Well, it sounds crazy now. We're thinking of these guys as all top 10 picks. But remember last year we were saying a similar kind of thing. And Jerry Jeudy's available at 20. And CeeDee Lamb was available. Where did they get him? 17? Like those guys went a hell of a lot later than everybody thought they would. Okay, Henry Ruggs went 11, which is higher than everybody thought he would go. But the players that we would have been saying, no way CeeDee Lamb is available where they're picking. He was. And they snagged him. Dallas at least. So yeah, Devontae Smith this low down sounds crazy, but it might not be.
Yeah, so T.Y. Hilton, from a free agent standpoint, he's number 39 on our board. He's 31 years old, but if we're talking about trying to win right now and winning at the intermediate level, he had the number 13 grade intermediate level last year. T.Y. Hilton could be that really good fit. I agree Devontae would be a great fit. I would just keep an eye on that from a Cardinals perspective. If I'm building the team 10 to 19 yard level where the best quarterbacks dominate, Kyler Murray's been one of the worst. How do we get that out of him? A T.Y. Hilton type, a Devontae Smith type would be fantastic, and you got to figure out where you're getting that to just, finish up that offense.
Yep.
So, Cardinals. We fixed them. Who's next on this? Los Angeles? And then, Rams. Rams draft analysis. That's it.
They got a whole bunch of extra picks.
That's it. No, they did. They get a whole bunch of compensatory picks. So they don't have to show up till day 2, which is nice.
Yeah, but then they got some stuff to play with.
Think about how much money they saved by not having to go to the draft on night 1. You save electricity. You save travel. You don't really save anything.
No. It's funny. We a lot of people sort of are generally mocking them for this concept of trading away all the draft picks. The picks that they got back in the compensatory pick system, they're pretty significant. Like, what did they get? A couple of third-round picks and a fourth? Those are not insignificant draft picks, particularly when you are able to pair them with, a couple of, first-round picks are gone. But on the other hand, your first-round picks have been spent on some pretty important pieces of that team. Jalen Ramsey, Matthew Stafford, now your quarterback. In the past, Brandon Cooks. Like, they have spent on important positions, and they're, because they've done that, essentially guaranteed a level of production that your first round draft pick might not have. Now, the offset of that is it's cost you a lot more, not just in the number of first round draft picks you've given up, multiple for guys like Jalen Ramsey and Matthew Stafford, but also the contract you've had to pay them versus a rookie contract. But just because it's different, like the New Orleans Saints thing, I don't think it's necessarily a ridiculous strategy to just be like, they've traded away all their first round picks. We know that's not the way teams are supposed to build. You build through the draft. Everybody knows this. But it isn't nuts. They've they've done this strategy, and it's not like they trade away all their draft the entire way, because look at the number of picks they have. They have got significant picks in the middle rounds. So they don't have anything in the first round. They don't have anything in the ass end of the draft, but they have quite a lot in the middle rounds, and those are not invaluable.
Yeah, it's what I love about
non-valuable, valueless.
There you go. I mean, that's what I love about the NFL and team building season, right? There isn't really one way to do things, and there are extreme strategies. We just talked about the Bucs and the Saints, who our guy Brad Spielberger, our cap expert over here at PFF, will tell you they do things completely opposite. The Bucs never push cap into future years. They just started doing it with that Levante David deal, right? Just because they see the window. The Saints have seen the window for 12 years, and they keep pushing. So everybody does it differently. So I am fascinated to see this one play out. I mean, the bottom line for the Rams season, because we don't have to talk about quarterback here, because we spoke about it plenty, the Stafford thing. How much of an improvement is Stafford over Goff? And if the quarterback can be worth 2 players worth of improvement. You know what I mean? Like if a good quarterback versus a great quarterback versus an average quarterback, like they can give you 2 to 4 players worth of improvement. So that gives the Rams leeway. The bottom line is it puts more pressure on their scouting and their draft picks. And that is the tough thing to sustain. There is no proof that teams are good at drafting mid-rounders or good at drafting overall or anything like that, right? And usually it goes in ebbs and flows. Like if there were trends, the Saints would just be like, oh, we're just going to draft like we did in 2017 every year. Like you don't have to push the cap ever. If every year you're going to come away with Marshawn Lattimore, a starting corner, a starting tackle, a starting safety, a starting running back, and a rotational edge. You would just do that every year with 4 other positions and get starters. So it's not as simple as just draft well. It puts more pressure on them hitting on those mid-round picks, and we'll see what kind of marginal difference Stafford is over Goff.
Yeah, but that's why being able to game or get lucky with the compensatory system is helpful, because you do maximize. You get more lottery tickets.
Smart. Yeah.
You get more lottery tickets, as they say, or at least you maximize your ability to take some swings and miss on a few. You're not going to hit on all those picks, but if they had traded away all of their picks and been left with basically nothing in the draft every single year, I think that would be a much more questionable strategy. But that they're able to offset some of that and bring back a couple of 3rd rounders and a 4th rounder in the compensatory system, that suddenly gives them a draft class to play with. Now, they're still low. They don't have 7 picks, which is what you start with, but they have 6. So that's not the 3 of them, right, are on day 2. So that's not a bad place to be.
As of record time right now, the Rams are $33 million over the cap. That needs to be sorted by next week. If there are some restructures to be had in there, but if we're talking potential cuts, Michael Brockers could be out. So Rob Havenstein bounced back, had a really nice year, 80 overall grade, 80.6 at right tackle. But like he's the type of player that's getting cut right now, and he would save $5 million, and then you just sign a Bobby Massey or something like. I mean, that I feel like those are the moves that are happening in the NFL. I don't want to speculate, but I'm just saying they have to get under the cap with some restructures, and then potential releases. And something's going to change by the time you hear this potentially, or at least over the next couple of days.
But as Brad Spielberger points out to us here, I think the majority of that money is coming from like significant restructures in-house, like shift a bunch of money around in terms of Donald's contract, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, shift those around, clear a ton of money that way.
And now that's a good nucleus, right? So the Rams have a really good nucleus, and I think that's why they're looking at Stafford versus Goff and saying, okay, throwing to Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, they want him to step in as the next guy. Josh Reynolds hits free agency. Feeling pretty good about the receivers. Gerald Everett hits free agency, but you still have Tyler Higbee there. Offensive line, as I said, they bounce back quite a bit. Do they start looking for the next left tackle still with Andrew Whitworth coming back there? Maybe. But I think the biggest question for the Rams next year is, can they replicate what they did defensively? Losing Brandon Staley, defensive coordinator, could be a big blow with Raheem Morris taking over. We just don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Because that system was awesome last year.
But you have to expect it to regress. You would
expect that. Losing John Johnson, too. He's their best free agent, 85.3 grade. He's been an 80-plus graded safety every year he's been healthy. I don't know if they try to get him back somehow after all the restructures. Leonard Floyd, another free agent. But they are the team, another one of those teams that's, picking off bargains here and there, and they have to hit on their draft picks too. Is it lazy analysis to just say that teams have to hit on their draft picks?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I think that they would love a speedster to add to that receiving group.
Did you just call me lazy?
No, I answered your question.
Okay, thanks.
I think they would love like a real burner to add to that group. It's a good receiving core already. There's a lot of talent there, but they don't have Will Fuller with all that space that they have.
Who's your burner?
I'm thinking in the draft more than free agency. I think they would love a guy with some like legitimate 4.3 flat kind of speed to add to that group that's talented.
I'm listening.
I don't have a name. I'm just thinking. I just think that's what they need.
I thought you were getting somewhere.
No, I'm not. Have you got a name? You got someone you want?
No, because I haven't looked at that against where they're picking at the moment.
Well, they don't pick until the second or third round.
57. So. First pick's 57.
I mean, what about a Tutu Atwell?
Yeah, he's that Kadarius Toney type.
Yeah, and more
spacey type,
a lower round guy than they're going to have a shot at. Kadarius Toney's going to go in the first or very top of the second round.
Tutu Atwell's gotten first round consideration with, which I know our 2-for-1 guys think is a little crazy.
Yeah,
especially compared to the other similar players. That's another thing I just want to keep an eye on. Sean McVay, we've mentioned quite a bit about their offense, right? And how much it's Shanahan at Tree and all that stuff. Shanahan has really evolved that offense and added different concepts, and the Rams dabbled with that a little bit last year. But Shanahan is still the GOAT at getting dudes in space. Can McVay do that? And is it Tutu Atwell? Is he the type of guy that would help make that happen?
Potentially. And I think the McVay thing is really interesting because he has evolved this offense, but not as much as Kyle Shanahan has evolved his. And it's still the biggest question mark surrounding McVay is, I think, has he learned enough to keep moving this thing forward and keeping ahead of the defense? And what is kind of fascinating is that the coaching tree that was causing him the most problems on defense was Brandon Staley's. Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley, the two high safeties, quarters looks, quarters looks causing all kinds of problems.
I miss going to the combine.
And he needed to figure out how to deal with that. So rather than just study it, but he actually hired one of the main proponents of it for his defense, which gave them the best defense in the NFL last year. But you have to also think that had a knock-on effect of those two guys spending a year being able to talk, compare notes, figure out how he could adjust his offense to attack the system that's causing him the most problems, which also happens now to be his own defense. That had to have helped, right? But because Staley did such a fantastic job, he only had a year of that, and he's out. He's gone. He's jumped ship. He's got his own head coaching gig now. Did McVay learn enough during that year of being able to bounce ideas off the biggest system that caused him issues? Or is that done now? Did he learn enough? Did he figure out where he needs to go and now has a pathway to evolve the offense? Or was this a really significant resource that's just walked out of the door and now you're back on your own? You've got to figure this all out by yourself.
It's a great question.
Thank you. You don't have any answer.
I don't know. No, I mean, it's a good McVay. Here's the trouble with winning in the NFL. He just lost his coach after 1 year, a coach that turned their defense around after he had Wade Phillips, right? McVay's done a really good job of surrounding himself with good defensive coaches. Raheem Morris doesn't necessarily have that track record or history. I want to know more, what is Raheem Morris going to just try to take that system to the next level? He's from that old cover 2 tree and all that stuff. What is the defense going to look like? Is it Raheem Morris's stamp, or is it Brandon Staley, 2.0, so to speak? Take this as the foundation. I want to make one other point about Aaron Donald's value and the compensatory pick thing that you said. In baseball, what they found was that closers, you could put anybody as a closer, you get them 30 saves, and they become a free agent because people value saves and they pay them. It's kind of like paying for sacks, right? And that was kind of like the way of bucking the system to get compensatory picks. Aaron Donald is a compensatory pick creator because Dante Fowler came in, had 15 sacks, career year, didn't even grade that well for us, but you just get 15 sacks because Aaron Donald's creating 100 pressures every year.
Yeah.
Dante Fowler leaves, big contract. Leonard Floyd's that guy this year. Didn't have a great year. Had all the sacks. Going to get paid.
This is
Aaron Donald's residual value in compensatory picks.
This is kind of, it's like what we talked about with Baltimore being able to sort of scheme double-digit sack edge defenders or running backs. Like if they were able to actually turn that into a designed system to flip these guys for compensatory picks down the line, Donald just does it automatically as part of being Aaron Donald.
All right, let's wrap it up with the Rams. Got to find a safety to replace John Johnson if you're not bringing him back. I think going on the cheap with the Trey Bostons of the world. And
that's such an easy year to need safeties, right?
Yeah. So I think you stitch that together in free agency. Draft, it's tough to predict. I will say Joseph Asai is only 65 on our draft board. He's a Texas edge defender. If you are looking to replace a Leonard Floyd, or if you want to continue to get compensatory picks, just bring in Bud Dupree on a 1-year deal, and he picks up 10. Well, he's got to get healthy.
But he's going to get paid.
He'll get paid. But you bring in somebody on a 1-year deal, get them 15 sacks, and just keep getting those third-rounders flowing. That's what I would do. So I think the Rams are going to be okay. They're going to be pretty good. I can't wait to see Stafford in that system. All right, we got the Seahawks and Niners.
I'll give you your guy, right? You bring in Aldon Smith. Aldon Smith will get 15 sacks next year.
Okay.
Next to Aaron Donald. Flip him. Right, flip him. Just let him walk for his third-round
I'm going to call. I got to talk to Zach and some of the other my Rams buddies and see if that's actually the strategy. And if it's not, make sure that it is.
Tell them that it should
Keep getting 1-year edge defenders in exchange for third
Or
rounders.
Dietrich Wise. Dietrich Wise could get himself 10 sacks
would
in
be
that
great.
system.
So Rams, fill out your roster with some depth pieces like those guys that we just mentioned. All right, let's go to the 49ers. Give them full love here, Sam. Draft Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts would just make most teams in the NFL special.
Yeah, because you're just thinking about what he opens up, what he does for your team. Again, thinking of offense through the lens of keep defensive coordinators up at night. He's the guy.
But he's
in this
also
draft.
so he's a genuine tweener without the negative connotations that normally comes with. So wide receiver, tight end tweeners are typically labeled that because there's something they can't do. They're either wide receivers that are too big and slow to play wide receiver properly, Kelvin Benjamin, say, or they're tight ends that can't block and therefore have to play wide receiver effectively. So there's something missing to their game which prevents them being particularly good at either one of those positions. They get lumped in the middle and they usually suck. He is a genuine tweener who could be a good wide receiver and a good tight end and can do them both at the same time. He's like one little bit of outside vertical release nuance away from being a genuinely unstoppable X receiver, like true wide receiver. And he can also be a top decent tight end who can block. Like his blocking is not bad. So he's genuinely like a tiny little piece of nuance away from being completely uncoverable at every position along the sort of offensive weaponry. And he could probably even line up in the backfield.
Let's text new pass game coordinator Bobby Slowick and say, what would you – I'm going to text him right now.
Okay, yeah.
What would you do with Kyle Pitts? Cover me.
Presumably celebrate dramatically. Kyle Pitts is going to be one of those people that he's going to be the draft Will Fuller, the one that we want to send everywhere. Once you get – there's not much of a limit to how high I would take this guy. I would take him in the top 5 and not think twice about it, which therefore means that every other team outside of the top 5 would be absolutely ecstatic with getting Kyle Pitts. So it's going to sound like we're going to want to send him everywhere because you should. Every team should want Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and look, with the Niners, I'm looking at this team, and we only got to see Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk play together a little bit.
Yeah.
And George Kittle. So you've already got those two guys. Space, I mean, they're just incredible in space. They're after the catch guys. They could run the jet sweep stuff. You ever see the all-11 offense? Or whatever it's called, A11 offense and everything. Well, you never know where the ball is. I mean, that's what they're creating in San Francisco. Like, what's the next missing piece? Is it Will Fuller? No, but is it like a legitimate speed threat? Remember they had Marquise Goodwin a couple years ago. Travis Benjamin's technically on the roster. Is that like the missing piece? Debo's not a burner, and Ayuk's not straight up deep threat or whatever. I wonder if Waddle or the 4-3 guy that you're saying too is that other scary piece for the Niners. That's what they did. Raheem Mostert too. I mean, he's fast. Remember a couple years ago when they made it to the Super Bowl, fastest team in the NFL along with the Chiefs. They still probably could improve in that area, and I wonder if that is a target. And we only say Pitts because it's Pitts, Kittle, Samuel, and Ayuk. You kidding me? How do you cover that?
Yeah, I mean, we started the show, though, with sort of saying, I know you can never have too many skill position players, but is it an issue when you have too many unconventional skill position players? Like, do they not just need one conventional flanker?
Probably, but your tin cup guy is the one that I would trust to use it. Kyle Shanahan. That's the only thing I'm saying. I'm wondering when. But at some does that stop?
At some point, having George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Kyle Juszczyk, and then Kyle Pitts. That's 5 guys, all of whom are at their best in the yards after catch, middle of the field, the non-conventional places that you deploy receiving weapons.
At some point, you want an X?
Yeah, like at some point, one of those guys has got to be able to play outside and just win vertically down the seam, right?
You want Kenny Golladay?
I mean, I don't care. I'm just saying, I love it in theory, but I do wonder if that does reach a critical mass where it's not working anymore.
So we love playmakers and all that stuff. That's not the top priority, though. There's 2 massive priorities on this team. The entire secondary is a free agent. The entire cornerback group, the top 4, are all free agents.
That's not ideal.
Okay, so same thing I said about the Falcons. Same thing I said about the Cardinals. The Niners' season is going to rest upon who they sign at corner, who they draft at corner, and just what we get out of them. It's that plus Trent Williams at left tackle. Bringing him back, or do you have to fork over a first-round pick for a guy or whatever it might be?
Sounds like he's going back. From the Chris Collinsworth podcast, Trent Williams was on. Richard Sherman, poked him to say, hey, he's going to go back to San Francisco. And he said, yeah, barking up the right tree, which was an idiom I haven't heard before. So it sounds like Trent Williams is going back to the 49ers, which will presumably also chew up a bunch of their salary cap space because he's not going back there on the cheap. But at least it's secured as your left tackle spot. Is the biggest question for them not, replacing your entire secondary is quite a large question. But they have to have their eye on quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
How could you not? I mean, forget how good you think Jimmy G is. Just his injury history at this point, you would be negligent to not at least be looking at the options, particularly where they draft.
Yeah, I mean, we had Mike Tannenbaum on the show a couple weeks ago. And
number 12, they're within sight of the top quarterbacks, and Jimmy G is a walking sick note. So you have to at least be looking at what the alternatives are.
Tannenbaum's point a couple weeks ago that you try to win your division. I mean, yes. And you draft against your division and all that stuff. They're definitely looking at this saying, we've got the worst QB in the division now, right?
Yep.
It was debatable maybe between Garoppolo and Goff, but I would say, Stafford is an upgrade. So Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson are in the division as of record time. We'll get to Seattle in a minute here. So yeah, I could see, and it's the same decision the Rams made. Like we hit our peak with Goff. We got to take that next step. And I think Shanahan was, he's had RG3, he's had Matt Ryan, had his best season, but like having RG3 and talk about keeping defenses off balance. What if he had a mobile threat back there? What if he took his incredible run game and added a QB run threat to it, and an Ayuk and a Deebo Samuel? That has to be running through their head, and especially at 12 overall. Yes.
Yeah. All right, let me
we're going to say the same guys again.
How much do you think that the 49ers could get from the New England Patriots for Jimmy G?
Not a ton.
Not a ton?
No. I just don't. The Patriots are somewhat desperate, but they don't play desperate.
Well, they haven't, because they haven't needed to be. This feels like an offseason where they actually might need to do that.
The most desperate they've ever been was a second rounder for Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah.
And this is probably the same level.
Desperate.
That is pretty desperate, especially in hindsight.
Yeah.
This is probably the same level of desperate. I would say a second round pick.
Instead of receiver.
I'd say a second round
pick.
Say
a second rounder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Garoppolo, you didn't like the Garoppolo deal because I think you were just wrong and looking at it the wrong way. They front-loaded the contract when they had a ton of money. Mm-hmm. And they gave themselves an out right now, so they can trade him without dead money. So that was smart. That was a genius way of doing it. You hedged as you built the roster, and they almost won a Super Bowl out of it.
The alternative way of looking at that is you paid an average quarterback an absolute boatload of money
at a time when you had a rebuilding roster. It didn't the money doesn't matter.
Having the money is not a good reason to spend it on something that isn't providing you that level of value.
No, because because an average quarterback with a really good roster around you is a Super Bowl caliber team, and that's what they were on their way to building.
Your point essentially is that, hey, this thing that I've got here, like I bought a used car, and it's but
you didn't know
its residual value is not going down. I'm not getting crushed in depreciation, but on the flip side, I've paid 3 times more than this car was worth up front.
At the time, there was still an unknown as to what he was.
Yeah, and they gambled and got it wrong.
He still could have been a top 10 quarterback. He
wasn't.
He was 13. So he was 13, number 13 in their Super Bowl year. Okay. He's Matt Hasselbeck.
Right, and they overpaid for that. Now, okay,
in years where they weren't spending the money anywhere else anyway,
but that,
and then they weren't overspending for
having money available to spend is not a good reason for overspending.
It's buying you the time to build the roster around a Matt Hasselbeck to make a Super Bowl run the same way the Seahawks did around Matt Hasselbeck. They played it perfectly. Now they're at a point where the roster's in a much better spot, and they're intrigued to go from QB 15 to QB 10. That's really smart.
Allowing yourself the out on the back end of the deal is absolutely better than giving him a deal that has no outs at any point in the contract, and you are boned start to finish in this deal. That doesn't make it a great deal to overpay for a guy that was never going to justify that contract.
What was the alternative? What should the Niners have done differently along the way?
Well, I mean, not 100% embrace the concept that Jimmy G was the truth, the light, and the future from day one the way they did.
They didn't.
They did. They traded for him aggressively, then handed him a giant contract off the back of like 5 games.
Listen, first off, what they should have done is drafted Deshaun Watson, right? At number 2 overall. Anyway, maybe Mahomes. But realistically, that's not what they did, though. They said, we've got 6-year contracts. We've got time to build this thing. Throw all the money early when we're not going to compete. Take the money away when we are going to compete. Like, that's a good way to do it for an opportunity to maybe have a top 10 quarterback. Oh, we landed at 15. Oh, who cares? Now we can get out and try to get back up to QB 10 and QB 8. That's where they're at right now. Smart. Smart football.
No, I don't think it is. You went aggressively after a quarterback that was never good enough and threw a ton of money at him. You paid him a giant sum of money, and just because you can get out of it now doesn't make it a smart deal.
All right. Anyway, Trey Lance would be their guy. Give me that speed. I think the QB running ability going to Shanahan is more valuable than some other places because I think he'll use it. So Trey Lance developing behind Garoppolo for a year. That's the move if you're going to go QB.
Well, I would be intrigued, as I say, trade Jimmy G to the New England Patriots.
Oh, you want to
be the one place that would want him.
Then what are you getting at QB?
Well, now you're positioned to go after one in the draft. Let's say you get New England's second-round pick back as part of this. That's 47.
Moving up for Fields or
let's say
Mac Jones.
You juggle the trade so that you're getting their first-round pick by sending your second along with Jimmy G. Now you got 2 first-round picks to potentially get up into the top. Maybe go after Philadelphia's pick at 6. Package your 2 first rounds, get up to 6, and now you've got a shot at, potentially more than just a Trey Lance.
Who do you like for
Who
Shanahan?
I like?
Zach Wilson would be fun, but
Zach Wilson would be. He's the one that I don't think they'll have a shot at almost regardless of what they do. It feels hard to believe they could get high enough to get a Zach Wilson, but who knows? Who knows? I don't know what to make of Fields, but Fields would be fascinating in that offense.
Yeah, I'd want to see that. I want to see a run threat, I think, with Shanahan. And I think that's what he feels too, right? I mean, part of having the Garoppolo ceiling isn't just his throw-for-throw play. It's, you don't get as much out of him in the run game, and Shanahan can take advantage of that. Let's rebuild their secondary really quick. Legitimately, they're all free agents. Richard Sherman, Jason Verrett, Kawan Williams, Ahkello Witherspoon, all free agents. If you bring Trent Williams back, say you're rolling with Jimmy Garoppolo, at number 12, you have to go corner. And I think that could be the J.C. Horn spot, Surtain, Caleb Farley. Those 3 guys that we keep talking about as our top 3. And then free agents see the same thing we keep saying too. Like you take one shot on a bigger name player, one shot on bringing Verrett back, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, they're the team that's kept rolling the dice year after year on that one Jason Verrett season. It feels like if anybody should get paid off for that, it's the 49ers. I guess you could argue that they did last year. They finally got an 800 snap year out of him. He played really well. That's their payoff. But, come on, sign the guy now. Bring him back. His injury history is so extensive that it feels like that must still depress his market how much could he really be getting paid for a team even coming off a good year like he just had? I would think he's still a pretty cheap guy, at which point the 49ers bringing him back and hoping he holds up again seems like a good move for all involved.
I think one of the big mistakes that they've made is not anticipating the spot that they're in. Witherspoon, if they brought him back on the cheap, maybe too, but they should have been looking at this a year or two ago, right? And that's why we always end up mocking corners to everybody, because you hit this point where you just always need one. You're always going to need a corner at some point.
Your base level is you need 3 of them at any given point.
Yeah, now you have 0.
Need depth. Yeah, and then you need depth behind those guys in case one of them gets hurt. So every team in the NFL needs 4 good corners at any given moment, and most of them don't have them. Plus, even the ones that do have them, you have free agency to juggle and all those kinds of things every year. So, yeah, cornerback might be the most sort of position-needy spot in football, because all right, you can argue the same thing with wide receiver, but it's easier to hide. If you only have 2 of them, you're okay. You can get away with that.
Right, you dictate the action with receiver, or you could replace it with a tight end or something.
So you can be the Minnesota Vikings and say, all right, we just have 2 receivers. We're only going to use 2 receivers. We're fine. You don't need to find 3 and 4, and 3 in case one of them gets hurt. But whatever, it's not as big a problem. If you only have 1 corner, you're just going to get lit up like a Christmas tree. You need 4. You need more than that. So everybody is constantly searching for cornerback help.
49ers offseason is going to be determined by that. Either they're going to make a power move at quarterback, and that's going to define it, or it's going to be defined by how they attack the cornerback market. So I think you got to add 1 or 2 free agents. I would go second wave of free agency, find the guys that fall through the cracks, and attack it with multiple picks in the draft. You have to, but it's not good that they got to this point of needing to bring in all those corners.
Yeah,
right now.
I'm not sure how teams allow that happen as regularly as they do. I mean, I guess part of their issue is that Jason Verrett wasn't supposed to be one of those corners, essentially. It's only in hindsight they're like, oh, that's one of their starting cornerbacks that's hitting the market. But Dallas did this, right, where they basically their entire secondary hit free agency at the same time. It feels like that's a thing you should be able to see coming on the horizon and head off at some stage.
To be fair, 2 years ago at this time, the Niners' biggest need looked like corner. They bring in Richard Sherman, and they got a good year out of Witherspoon. Whatever, the Super Bowl year, it did all come together. K'Wan Williams was good. They did figure it out in 2019. They'll have to have something magical like that happen once again. All right, let's wrap it up. Last team, Seattle Seahawks. Keeping Russ?
They have to, right? Come on. I'm not. Why would you trade him away? It's just dumb. Why? Why would you do it?
So, again, the question was posed to me this week. What could Seattle be thinking? And we've mentioned this before, right? Are they thinking, historically, we won in 2013 and 14. Russ was a passenger, not the catalyst.
Yes.
We had a great defense. We had a great run game. We handed him the keys. Haven't won since. Haven't made the NFC Championship since. I mean, is it as simple as that?
I think that the root of all of this is a fundamental disagreement between the team and Russell Wilson as to how good Russell Wilson is, which I think that's what's feeding all of this. Russell Wilson thinks he's like the greatest quarterback of all time, or wants to be seen as one of them.
That's the rumor. That's what is coming out of that.
And look, from our perspective, Russell Wilson is the best quarterback the Seahawks have ever had in their franchise history. He's also arguably one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Top 2 or 3 asset, right? Behind Mahomes.
So it's not an unreasonable position that he's looking at it, particularly when you factor in that, these guys are all crazy. They all think they're the greatest, whatever they are, right? So it makes sense for Russell Wilson to see himself as one of the best quarterbacks ever. The Seahawks, I think, are a significant way away from that, just by the way they've treated him constantly. They're like happy. He's a good quarterback. They love him. They think he's a great franchise quarterback, but they have always acted like he's not quite as good as that. Like, they've never treated him the way the Chiefs treat Patrick Mahomes in terms of, we're 100% fine with just letting him cook. Let him do whatever he wants. Patrick Mahomes is amazing. We're going to lean on him. We're going to pivot away from the run game when it makes sense. That's how we're going to operate. They have always worked on the basis that, hey, the way you win games is defense and the run game. And if we have a good quarterback, it's great. It helps. But we don't want to go away from those other things because that's how you win games. Now, maybe that's just Pete Carroll not valuing quarterbacks as much as the rest of the NFL is the moment. Or maybe it's a Russell Wilson specific thing. But even last year, the first 8 games, it's let Russ cook. Everybody's celebrating, and this is what we've been asking for. You're like, they're just waiting for a chance to like pivot back to 30-plus run carries a game, load up Chris Carson, let's try and win this thing on defense. Like, they have the same dream game unfolding that the Minnesota Vikings do, which is our dream game is the defense plays out of its skin and our quarterback attempts 18 passes, completing 15 of them for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, that's their dream game. And it's the same for Minnesota and Seattle. And I don't think it's a coincidence that both those franchises are led by old defensive-minded head coaches.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I mean, the problem with this analysis, of course, is like, let's get to the good old days of 2013 and 2014 when it's like,
just assemble the greatest defense in the NFL and we're good.
You had the prototype at corner, safety, in both safety spots for your particular defense, 2 future Hall of Famers in Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman, right? Mm-hmm. And Cam Chancellor, again, the prototype strong safety that everybody's trying to fit into this scheme for the last 6 years. Replicating that is tough. I always like to compare Russell Wilson to Ben Roethlisberger and Tom Brady through the sense of Brady, all 3 players won Super Bowls earlier in their career without carrying the team, right? But there was a point in Brady and Roethlisberger's career where they became the guy. It went from Roethlisberger, the passenger, to Roethlisberger, the catalyst. And the same thing, of course, happened with Brady, right? It was like, all right, you're the guy right now. And maybe it took, and Big Ben still needed a great defense to win in 2008, and Brady took a while to like win another championship and all that stuff, but it was just the right move because in part you don't have the same defense. You are paying your quarterback a lot more, and it's an offensive-driven game. And even though it's uncomfortable and you don't win every single season, it's still the right move to build around Russell Wilson and let him cook and all that fun stuff, even though the second half of the year he was QB number 21 instead of QB 1 like he was the first half of the year.
Yeah, but where I come down to with all this is I get why there's tension between them. And I think that Russell Wilson probably is right to feel a little bit slighted by the way they treat him, particularly if some of the stuff that's been reported is accurate in terms of how they've sort of dismissed his input and all those kinds of things. I get why it got to the point where Russell Wilson went on public broadcast mediums and went, hey, look, I'm pissed off. We need to change this. But at that point, it seems very easy to fix because your two choices presented to you now, if you are the Seahawks, are take your quarterback a little bit more seriously and address his major concerns, which are primarily he's getting hit too much. Regardless of how much of that is his fault, which is a significant portion, and that's a reasonable point to bring up, treat it seriously in a way that you haven't been in the past, and placate the guy a little bit more when it comes to whatever input he wants to have. Again, this is like the Deshaun Watson thing. You don't need to have him like running the offense or being the GM, the de facto GM making all the personnel decisions. The guy wants some input, and apparently you've been brushing that off up until now. Give him some more input. It's not hard to make a guy feel like he's a big, significant part of the thing, even if he isn't really. Right. Just feed into that. If you're Seattle, they've been rooted to the ass end of the spending charts in terms of offensive line money for the entirety of Russell Wilson's contract, or career rather. Whether that's by design or whether it's just a happy accident or you focused on the draft more than free agency, whatever it is, it's really easy to fix. Just go out there and spend a little bit of money in the offensive line. Say, see, we heard you, Russ. Here it is. Doing that versus going, oh, well, this has obviously gone to hell. Let's blow it all up and let's try and find another Russell Wilson seems absurd to me.
Yeah, so this is what we would do to fix Seattle. So I like a lot of what you said. I'd get input with Russ. I would go back to the same thing we've talked about with McVay's offense evolving. If you're talking about Seattle's offense taking the next step, the play action downfield game is awesome. They need other answers when that's taken away, i.e. when the Rams play them 3 times in the second half, taking away all the deep stuff except for like one busted coverage or 2 busted coverages. So they need to figure out how to stretch the field horizontally. And that's where I would get Russ's input and say, okay, how can we expand this? How can we run a little bit more quick game? How can we run more short and intermediate stuff? Which receivers are going to, fit that style a little bit better? Because right now, you've had Tyler Lockett get hurt in the second half of the season or taper off in the second half of the season, and the offense has gotten worse. So DK is awesome. Tyler Lockett, when healthy, is awesome. Same analysis as every other team. Get more receivers, but get ones that complement Tyler Lockett and complement DK Metcalf. I think you have room for I know Philip Dorsett was on the roster last year, but like the Scotty Miller, designed deep threat guy, right? Just get behind the defense 2 or 3 times per game. Russ will hit you. There's room for that guy in this offense, and there's room for more of maybe a Marvin Jones, high volume, short, or intermediate type of threat, a T.Y. Hilton, to go with Lockett and have Lockett insurance and to go with DK?
I think they should also make a splash in free agency on the offensive line. I mean, that's the thing that's bugging Russell Wilson the most. Let's fix it. You have bad offensive linemen almost across the board. Dwayne Brown was good. And it's not a coincidence that Dwayne Brown is your best offensive lineman. He's the one where you went hard and made a big move to acquire him via trade. So the Seattle Seahawks centers last season gave up an absolute ton of pressure, like 20 plus amongst the two of them. Corey Linsley is available as a free agent and gave up 4 pressures last season. Best center in the NFL, and it's at a position where you could use an upgrade. Go hard after Corey Linsley.
There's a good interview with Eric DeCosta, I think, for the Ravens, talking about scheme fit and all that stuff. He's like, we're the Baltimore Ravens. You got to get the right guy that fits. We like to run power run. You need a big guy that can do that. That's part of the problem with Seattle too. They think they're picking offensive linemen like they're the Ravens. They think they're a power running team, and they need 340-pound guards and 320-pound tackles and all that stuff. That is part of the issue, right? Is they're trying to build this power downhill rushing attack, and Mike Upati just retired, but like those are the types they like. They just drafted Damian Lewis, who was far better as a run blocker than he was as a pass blocker. You need guys that can pass protect and guys that you're not winning because dudes are getting an extra like 0.2 yards per carry on power runs. You're going to win because you're going to give Russell Wilson 2%, 3% more clean pockets, and he's going to invite pressure and all that stuff, but you're going to keep him clean a few more times per year, and that's where you're going to find a bit of an edge. So, yeah, Seattle has to go more pass-blocking offensive linemen rather than the big dudes that they think are going to crush people.
Yeah, Lindsey also the best-graded run-blocking center in the NFL last year as well. So
I know, but it's a zone scheme, and he's not huge. I'm just saying.
It makes sense. Go get him.
I'm with it. I like it.
Go get him. Make Russell Wilson happy. Make it a very overt show that, hey, we're taking this seriously now. The idea that you would blow this up because you've let it get this far is ridiculous.
All right, another trend here. Their secondary is free agent. All free agents.
Oops.
Their top 2 corners, right? Quentin Dunbar and Shaquille Griffin. Both free agents. And KJ Wagner. Wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
KJ Wright?
Yeah, I can see that.
Listen, it's like hour 8 of team analysis, team 32 here. KJ Wright, also a free agent. So they've got some things to do defensively. I think linebacker, they're going to be okay. They've drafted for it. Jordan Brooks will probably step right in.
Yep.
Bobby Wagner is still awesome, but they got to reshape their entire secondary too, which was already kind of trash last year, even though there was promise going into the year.
I mean, Dunbar didn't play a whole lot last year, so that's not as big a loss, but Shaquille Griffin has been their number 1 corner for a few years now, and that's an issue. However good he's been, it's still better than the guy behind him, so you kind of need to figure out what your plan is there.
They're okay from a cap space standpoint, but
he might be a guy they try and bring back.
Yeah. I think they were trying. They were considering the franchise tag, I believe. Predicting their draft is just nearly impossible.
Yeah, they always do something different to what you think they will do.
Never looks anything like our draft board. Tyson Campbell is on 52 on our draft board, cornerback, 6'2". They do still kind of lean toward the long corners with decent arm length and the whole thing. Greg Newsome, the Northwestern corner, doesn't have necessarily the arm length, but big dude who can run and
it's around a 4.31 apparently. If you listen to Pro Days.
So it's like a 4.51 adjusted
up.
Yeah,
like that. We need to figure out what the adjustment is for these things.
There's another Melifonwu out there, 6'3", 213, destined for Seattle. So I think there's room for the mid-round corner that they like to take a shot on, or that they could take a shot on. They're probably going to draft a running back high because you just know they will.
Yeah, well, because they're losing 2 of them.
Losing Chris
otherwise, you
Carson.
got to rely on your former first-round pick, Rashad Penny, to carry the load.
I mean, isn't that good? Russ is smart enough to know that the running back doesn't move the needle, right? And Seattle's just probably going to draft. They don't have a first-round pick, but their first pick's going to be a running back, and Russ is just going to like.
That's when he wants
He's out. He's like, now I've officially demanded a trade. I didn't before, but now I've demanded a trade.
Yeah, now I have. Now I want out, and I'm gone.
You just know that Seattle's sitting there with all those holes, and they're going to go running back, aren't they?
It's just when you compare the 2 quarterback situations between Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, I get why Deshaun Watson wants out, and I don't feel like that's repairable. It doesn't feel like there's anything that the Houston Texans can do to convince him that, hey, we're going to move this thing in the right direction. You're going to be part of it. Everything's going to be rosy in a couple of years. It doesn't feel like the Seattle conversation to get there is that hard. It's like, look, we've been winning. Like, we're good. We didn't just come off a 4-12 season where you were the only viable human on this roster. We're like a pretty good team every year.
Yeah.
And you're a good part of it. And okay, we've let some things slip that apparently have pissed you off. Let's all come together. Let's work this out and let's go win another Super Bowl. Like, how hard can that conversation be?
Yeah, I think they'll figure it out. I think they'll be okay. There'll be some reconciliation there. But again, Russ, we mentioned this too, but like Russ is, if he's asking for a trade, he's asking for a Deshaun Watson situation because of what the other team's going to have to give up. He's asking to go to a situation where nobody can build around him when he already has, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett as a starting point.
Yeah.
Definitely attack offensive line, as you said, in a way that's just different. I like the idea of Corey Linsley replacing, they have holes at center and left guard on paper right now. So, yeah, it's pretty good.
Done.
Do we fix Seattle?
Yeah.
Get all those free agent corners that we said.
We fix them by buying them marriage counseling lessons and just get everyone in a room together.
One other big issue. Their pass rush is atrocious. Their best pass rusher was wearing number 43 last year, and he just got released. That's Carlos Dunlap. So that's a place they need to go to. Edge. I could see Carl Lawson being a nice fit there.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Sleeper edge rushers?
There aren't a ton of sleeper edge rushers. I think, if anything, the edge rushing group skews in the other direction in terms of overrated.
Romeo acquired Dietrich Wise, who we've mentioned before. You know who I like is Tyus Bowser, but not necessarily for Seattle. I like him in a place where he's going to be more versatile, like a place like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh for Bowser would be good. Go back to the Pittsburgh episode. Let me put Bowser with the Steelers to replace Bud Dupree. Justin Houston, Flyer.
I mean, they do feel like a team that would roll the dice on a couple of these guys that are. I mean, Olivier Vernon in that defense, albeit injured, and concerns that you're not going to get him for a while, 100% healthy. Like even a guy like Samson Ebukam, he's been okay. Like he's not a bad player.
That's part of the problem in Seattle right now is they've been trying to stitch it together since losing Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill, and it's not been good.
No,
it's gotten worse every year. So they got to attack the defensive line. For all the Russ drama, defensive line and secondary, wide receiver 3. I think are the biggest questions for Seattle. And O-line.
That's a lot of quarterback leave.
That's a lot of questions, actually.
I mean, it is. They're not good right now.
Who's winning the West?
Who's winning the Rams?
Arizona.
Arizona?
They're going to do it.
No.
Yeah. Kyler Murray, year 3. You watch.
Okay.
Calling it now. I don't know. It's 8 hours of analysis. I'm losing it. That'll do it. That'll do it. We've fixed every single team in more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Go check out the previous podcast. I think it's some of our most fun discussions. Next week, we're going to pull 3. Are we going to do 3 podcasts next week?
Yeah.
All right. So just be ready. There's going to be 3. Not sure exactly which days yet, but we're thinking Monday, Thursday, Friday? Friday, kind of like a recap?
Probably.
Let's think of Monday. Monday will be like our big free agent preview. We'll review franchise tag stuff, the stuff that happens over the weekend, and we'll give you guys kind of a primer for what's going to happen the entire week. We'll have like a midweek update on Thursday and more of a recap for everything on Friday. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, stick with us. Stick with PFF.com for all your free agent needs, and go check out Underdog Fantasy, $10. Use the promo code PFF. Get Edge for free. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you Monday.